Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It's November 20th, 2024. And today we're going to be doing an epic traditional Mormon Stories interview with Abbie Clark. Hey, Abbie.
Hi.
Today's interview is going to be about someone who I think the last straw of her faith fell like 4 or 5 months ago. Is that right, Abbie?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
There's all sorts of cool parts of this story. There's a BYU component. There's a theater, a theatrical component to it.
Yes.
Young ambassadors camp in here, but also Abbie's father apparently went to prison while you were on your mission. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
But also Abbie was promised interpatriarchal blessing to have children. And there's some infertility components to the story. And then it's also just sort of for millennial age, Gen Z age.
Yeah, right on the cusp.
Yeah, just what would make a Gen Z / millennial, a zillennial, what would make a zillennial sort of walk away from Mormonism just in the past couple months. Mm-hmm. So how's that for an introduction, Abbie?
That sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
And if that weren't enough, I'm joined by my partner, my co-host, Margie. Hey, Margie.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Abbie, we like to start giving each of our interviewees a chance to share an intention to kind of talk about why they would want to come on Mormon Stories to tell their story. You're a returned missionary. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you have faithful family members and friends that are still in the church.
Yeah.
So why would you want to tell your story on Mormon Stories podcast?
Mm-hmm. I love this question. I love that you always start with this. For me, I love stories. I always have. Like you mentioned theater a little bit. Theater has I was drawn to that from like a very, very young age, telling stories. I'm a big reader too. And so, but not only like fictional stories, real stories as well. I love listening to Mormon Stories, obviously, and other podcasts where people just tell their stories, because I think there's so much we can learn from stories about the world and about ourselves. And listening to stories is something, or reading stories or watching stories has always been something that helps me process and like I said, like learn things. And that is partially what Mormon Stories has done for me. And so I wanted to come and like do that for other people, basically.
Beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful. And Wicked's being released like this weekend,
in
right?
Like 2 days. Yeah.
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 I think you're a Wicked fan. Is
Huge.
That right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Me too.
Yes.
I think I've seen it 3 or 4 times.
Oh, I've only seen it once on Broadway,
Yeah.
but in tours and stuff, I've seen it a few times.
Yeah. And right as I was processing my faith crisis, my sister Gina, who's passed away, told me you need to check out Wicked. And she was a huge musical theater fan. Mm-hmm. And I think Wicked is like the perfect metaphor for losing your faith in a high demand religion.
Yes. Yeah. It's kind of crazy to me that it has always been something that I've loved so much, because, well, I even like The Wizard of Oz was my favorite movie as like a 3-year-old.
Oh, wow.
Like that was my first favorite movie. I was obsessed, like walked around the house in my ruby slippers and my gingham dress with a little stuffed Toto, and like just totally obsessed with The Wizard of Oz. And so then when I found Wicked, when I was like 11 or so, it was like just fell in love with it and have always been in love with it. And now it has this like whole new meaning, and is like kind of cool to me that story of like finding your own power after seeking it in others so much spoke to me from like such a young age.
Did you say you have a Wicked tattoo?
Yes.
Do you want to show us?
Yeah. It's
what
on
does
my
it say?
arm right here. It says "Defy Gravity."
Oh, okay. I love it. And we're not in any way sponsored by Wicked.
I wish.
Yeah.
That's a dream.
But check it out. It's a fantastic musical movie.
Yes. Yeah. I think the movie's going to be awesome. I'm so excited. Yeah.
All right, Margie, anything before we jump in?
I don't think so.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, Abbie. So let's start with your parents. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about their, where they met and or got married, their faith levels, their church activity levels, where they kind of got married and where they kind of set up family to then have you come into the picture?
Yes, totally. So yeah, my parents both were born members. My mom's family is like multi-generational LDS, like way back pioneer ancestors. Like I looked this up recently on Family Search because I've been a lot more interested in this. My like fourth great grandfather was sealed to his first polygamous wife in Brigham Young's office.
Wow.
So
That sounds very Mormon.
yes.
Yeah.
And she was like 15, I think, too. So
Also very Mormon.
yes. So yeah, very like pioneer heritage, very Mormon. My great grandfather, who's still alive and just turned 100, actually is like a sealer in the temple, and like huge like legacy Mormon family. My dad, his mom is a convert, and then he grew up in the South. He's from the South, and they joined I think my grandpa was like baptized as a child, and then my grandma was baptized when they lived in Puerto Rico as part of like my grandpa's job, and he reactivated and have been extremely faithful ever since. Like they have served in the temple for a long time. My grandparents are very, very in the church, and my dad grew up very Mormon as well. My parents met at BYU, so also very Mormon.
Yeah.
My mom was like on the ballroom dance team at BYU and loved that. And they got married in the Salt Lake Temple just a few years before they had me, and I'm the oldest.
Okay.
And then I grew up in Sandy, Utah, and had like four younger siblings. No, 3 younger siblings. There were 4 of us total.
So you're the oldest of 4?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. What high school area did you kind of grow up in?
Jordan. I went to Jordan High School. So
Bee
Sandy.
Digger?
Yes.
Bee Digger?
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so your parents kind of raised you in Sandy. For those who don't know, describe Sandy, Utah, because that's kind of prime Utah city.
Yeah. I mean, very Mormon. Like almost all of my friends were Mormon. I had a good friend growing up in elementary school that wasn't a member, but that was like rare. Like there weren't a ton of kids in elementary school or middle school like that. It's just what everybody is. So yeah, very, very average, typical Mormon family. And we lived to also in the house we lived in growing up, my grandparents, my mom's parents, also lived in the same ward as us. And they are obviously like very Mormon. My grandfather served as a mission president when I was like, how old would I have been? Like 8 or 9, something like that. So yeah.
Okay, so what type of Mormon family culture did your family have during your childhood that you remember?
Really just normal, like kind of when you...
For our never Mormons, what does that mean?
Okay, so church on Sundays, family home evening every week. My dad was like called to be in the bishopric when I was like... Well, this like right before the divorce happened and everything. So like we were a very like I would call us like the picture perfect like idyllic Mormon family. My mom had callings in Relief Society and primary, and my dad was a real estate agent, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And we were like really happy. Like my parents had a really good marriage. Like anyone looking from the outside would just say like they are like doing the things. Like that's how you do it for
So
sure.
like family prayer, scripture study.
Yeah.
Going to church every Sunday.
Yes.
What about like swearing,
no.
tea, coffee,
Nope.
our movies,
No.
immodest clothing?
Never. No.
So you were in it to win it.
For sure. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fully devout.
Yes.
Were your parents going to the temple like on date nights kind of thing?
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And do you remember going to church as a kid before your teenage years and whether it made you happy and what you liked about it?
Yeah. I mean, thinking back to when I was like super young, like primary age, I don't know how well I remember it, but yeah, I always liked church. And I feel like, and this will come in more as we keep going too, that like the church really worked for me as like a young person. It worked really well for me. I fit the mold really well. I really liked primary. I also was like, I feel like fell into the stereotype of like oldest child, especially oldest daughter, like rule follower. I really liked I think that the structure of like, here's how you do things, here are the rules, follow them. I was like, got it.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
that was easy for me and like felt good. I don't have like a really rebellious personality. I'm not the type of person to like question authority naturally. So yeah, I liked church. It all like worked really well for me. I really liked primary. I loved music from a really early age. Obviously we've talked about like musical theater and stuff. So I loved like singing time and singing in church. That was something that happened like really early on where was a thing for me to like, I got a lot of like validation, felt very special. People would ask me to sing like solos in primary programs or as I got older, even in sacrament meeting and stuff. And like, so that part of church was really huge for me, the music part of it. And
Do you remember any favorite primary songs that you like to sing?
I always loved I Am a Child of God. That's like the classic, or Families Can Be Together Forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so music, primary, all the things.
Yeah.
Anything about your childhood before we get into your teen years?
I don't think so. It was,
Okay.
yeah, pretty normal.
So how was your Mormon adolescence?
So this is where things get interesting. So when I was like 13, it was like the summer before my 8th grade year. The story surrounding all of it is so Mormon too. So I was at girls camp the summer before my 8th grade year. Yeah, when I was 13. And my dad was in the bishopric. Like I said, he was the second counselor, I believe. And I was at girls camp. I was a beehive, and we would like alternate like stake girls camp one year, ward girls camp the other year.
Yep.
So it was ward girls camp, which I liked much better than stake girls camp because we would do it a lot like bougier when it was just the ward. It was never like actually camping. We went and stayed in like, there was a family who they had like they called it a cabin, but it was like a rich person cabin up in Bear Lake. Yeah.
That was your
Girls camp. Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
The area that we lived in Sandy had of quite a lot of like more affluent families.
Got it.
And so we went to girls camp in Bear Lake and we did like boating and tubing and stuff. And it was like so fun. It was one of my favorite girls camps ever, honestly, which is ironic because of what happened. So, so the last day of girls camp, the bishopric comes to like the last day for some reason. I don't know why that's a thing, but you know how that happens? They like come and they're there for testimony meeting.
Yes.
And
they preside.
Yeah. Only for the last day though. And they stay the night, that last night at girls camp. So my dad was there because he was the second counselor in the bishopric and I had like seen him earlier in the day. And then the beehives, we left to go do our hike because that was like a requirement. Like you're supposed to do a hike every year at girls camp. So we left to go do our hike. And as we're coming back from the hike, we're like walking up the road back to the house that we were staying in. My dad drove this like big black truck and I saw him in the truck, like driving away the opposite direction from the house. And I was like, that's weird. Like, where's he going? He's supposed to like spend the night tonight. Where would he be going? And I think I must have said something to like one of my leaders or maybe one of the other bishopric members when we got back, like, why did my dad leave? And they were like, oh, he had to go home for some reason. And I was like, oh, I didn't really think too much of it because like I was having fun at girls camp. So then when I get home from girls camp, my mom sits me down privately and says, so yesterday, while you were at girls camp, 2 IRS agents knocked on the door and started asking for your dad. And my mom was like, what do you mean? Like, what? Like, and it suddenly became very clear that like he was in trouble with the IRS. So she called him and said, IRS agents are at our house. What's going on? And so he drove home and it turned out, and you know, she explained this to me as best as she could to my like 13-year-old self, that basically, so this is how it all started, which I didn't even tell you before we started, is that he hadn't been paying taxes basically for like years and years and years and years, like a really long time. So he was in like serious trouble.
I see.
My mom had no idea about that at all. And then once like that came out, at this point, I don't know exactly like the whole sequence of events, but basically she told me that like your dad's in a lot of trouble. There's a chance that he could go to jail because what she knew at this point was that he'd been evading taxes. And Then there was more stuff that came out about, he was a real estate agent. I think I mentioned that. And he'd been, doing real estate investing, taking money from investors to invest in like different, developments, projects, whatever, and using that money to pay other people off or just,
It's kind of known as a pyramid scheme or a Ponzi scheme, I think.
Yes. Yeah. But I don't think it was as like, some people have the opinion that it was very intentional. He was intentionally being shady with people's money. And to me, it maybe seems a little bit more likely that he was just sort of like mismanaging money. He was not organized and was doing whatever he could. This was like 2009 as well. So that's important context. The real estate market was a disaster. And that's when the meltdown happened. Yes. Yeah. 2008 was when everything. Yeah. So 2009, things were not good. And so he was just doing what he could to
kind
try
of survival.
Yes.
Maybe he got over leveraged, had too much debt, was trying to get new investments to pay off, to keep making payments on old debt.
And then
got over his head.
Yes. And then the next thing he knows, like suddenly there's no more money for anything ever. And so a lot of people lost money. So this all came out like all at the same time. Wow. There were other things he'd been doing. Like, there were like a few different properties, that he had bought for projects that for some reason he had like used my mom's signature on things, like forged my mom's signature on documents. So now there were like properties that she technically owned that she had no idea about. It was a huge mess. Huge mess that my mom had like no idea was going on. So big shock. And so she sat me down and she didn't explain all of this, but as much as she could, she explained to me that day. And at that point she was saying like, he's in a lot of trouble. This is a huge mess, but we're going to stay together. She said that to me, like very specifically, like we're not getting divorced. This is going to be really hard, but I'm going to stay with him for now and we'll see how things go. And I was, like I said, I was the oldest of 4 and my next oldest sibling was my brother. He's 3 years younger than me. So he was 10. So the difference between that, like the difference between a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old in this kind of a situation, a lot. Like, and I don't even know how much she told my younger siblings what was really going on, because like, how do you explain those things to it? Like a 10-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 3-year-old. My youngest brother was 3. So anyway, so a day or so goes by. My dad went through the whole process of like going to the bishop and like confessing all of that, because that was something that needed to happen, I guess. And then, it was like a day or two after that, my mom was like, the way she told me was that she felt like there was more that he hadn't told her. And she attributed it to the Spirit at the time, like the Holy Ghost telling her that there was something else that he hadn't told her. And she said that to him. It was like at night, all of us were in bed. And, she said that, like, there's more that you're not telling me. And he was like, I can't tell you. He didn't want to, because he knew that like everything would change. And, it took him like a couple hours to finally fess up. But then what came out was that he had been cheating on my mom for like half of their marriage. Basically, ever since my younger sister, when my mom got pregnant with my younger sister was when it started. And she was like 8 at the time, and they had been married for like 13 years. So like more than half of their marriage. So that combined with all of the illegal and financial things, my mom was like, I can't do this. So they woke us up the next morning, and like I remember like so vividly, my mom woke me up and said like, we're gonna have a family meeting downstairs. And I like knew immediately. I was like, they're getting divorced. Before they even said anything, it was like just a feeling. I knew that's what was coming. We went downstairs and they told us, Dad's gonna leave. He's gonna move out, and we're getting divorced. It was wild.
I can imagine.
Because it literally went from like perfect Mormon family to
in appearance.
Yes, in appearance, yes. And from my understanding, that's I didn't
in feeling and perception.
Yes. To everything blew up in like the course of like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah. That's right.
It was crazy.
So sorry.
That's so, for anyone at any time, honestly, but
Yes.
also for a young,
Yeah.
just beginning your teen years, that really is something.
Yeah.
I'm curious, that morning, did they try to explain why they were getting divorced? Did they get into, like, how did they frame it to you why they were separating
That's
at that time?
a good question. I think
If you remember.
Yeah.
it's a fuzzy memory for sure. But I think I'm pretty sure they said that like your dad's been cheating on your mom. I think so. And I'm pretty sure that like I was really the only one of my siblings who really understood what that meant.
Yeah.
Like I can remember my younger brother who was 10 having a conversation with my mom in like the days and weeks after, I don't remember how soon after, like asking her like, what does that mean that dad was cheating on you? Like, like how, like, yeah, kids don't understand that. And so that became kind of like, I think that was a reason that like then my role, I became second mom basically from that point on. And one of the reasons I think was because I just understood more like what he had done and what had happened more than my siblings could just because they were younger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something? Okay.
Do you remember how you felt then after you learned, these things about your dad that you didn't know, probably wouldn't have guessed?
Yeah.
Do you remember how you felt about him in those moments? Maybe not processing more, but in that moment, did it change the way you felt about him? Did you feel this sense of like, what did you feel?
It was really sad, obviously. That was the big thing. And really confusing. Like I didn't understand like why, like he would, and like it for sure made me see him differently. It was like I felt like I couldn't recognize him anymore. Like, I don't know who this person is actually. Like even my 13-year-old self was like, this is not, I said this, like, I think pretty even just a couple days after everything happened, like it felt more like my dad died than a divorce because it totally changed the way that I saw him. Like the dad that I knew and I had grown up with was like gone and maybe didn't even exist in the first place. Like I just felt like I don't know this person anymore. So it was, really sad and confusing. And then there was, anger and all of that stuff that came after, lots of feelings of betrayal and yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. In many ways, it reminds me of like a version of your childlike innocence and trust, like that version of yourself. Do you feel like that kind of died too?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's, And for sure, as far as he was concerned, like I couldn't ever trust him again the way that I had before. Like, Yeah,
so hard.
Yeah, I listeners will know I had my parents had that conversation with us in middle school as well.
Okay.
And I remember, and there was bankruptcy stuff involved.
Oh,
and
wow.
So I remember like the county sheriff coming by our house and knocking on the door.
Wow. Super similar. Yeah.
So my dad was taken at least to the sheriff's office. He didn't go to prison, but I think it's worth noting that you're not kind of throwing your dad under the bus. You told me before the show that he's been on podcasts. He had his own podcast talking about being in prison. Mm-hmm. So this is something he's talked about publicly.
Yes. Yep. He's very open about all of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Still hard, but I think that's important.
Yeah,
to mention.
And you've also rebuilt. I mean, we'll get there, but you've rebuilt.
100%. Yes.
him.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yes.
Okay.
And I should mention too that there was more. There's so much. I could keep going. He also he hadn't even been worthy to serve a mission. Like he had been hiding these types of things for his entire life as a Mormon. Like this was not something that only started when he was married to my mom. Like he had had sex with girls before his mission and hadn't told anyone about it. And so it truly was like he was living
a split life.
Yes.
For many years.
Yeah.
And I'll just say viewers and listeners will know that Utah, according to the FBI personnel I've spoken with, Utah by some accounts, leads the nation, or at least historically has led the nation in per capita fraud.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So Utah is known by FBI personnel I talked to as one of the fraud capitals of the United States per capita. It's very common for MLMs, which aren't, some of them are legit or legal.
Yeah.
But historically, there have been MLMs that have acted in illegal ways.
Yeah.
But then just so many fraud schemes, pyramid schemes.
Yeah.
So Utah is just really known for fraud.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, I think every religion and every state has fraud. So we can't say Mormonism causes the fraud. On the other hand, we know that Joseph Smith's, once we read about the founding of Mormonism and you really study the treasure digging and the Book of Mormon and the Book of Abraham and Joseph's polyandry and polygamy and underage brides, I guess Joseph's history is sort of indistinguishable from fraud.
Yes.
So when the founder of your church has acted in a way that's indistinguishable from fraud, and then also every Mormon Stories episode I ask about word of wisdom and law of chastity stuff, not for any other reason than that it's shame and secrecy and double lives is such a part of the Mormon experience.
Yes.
It would make so much sense that your dad might have learned to hide and lie as a Mormon from a very young age, or else he would face very severe consequences.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to project all that in your story, but I'm trying to provide maybe a little bit of context, especially to our never Mormons.
100%. Yeah. One, there's such a culture too. Well, obviously, like secrecy is such a huge thing in Mormonism. It's like so baked in to
It's
everything.
multi-generational.
Yes. Yeah.
Like you talked about your great-great-grandparents being polygamists.
Right.
They
Yeah.
probably hid their polygamy from federal law enforcement agents who were trying to throw them in prison.
Well, yeah.
So the church hid its polygamy and hid from law enforcement officials for decades.
And there's such a culture too of everything is perfect always.
Yes, what it looks like.
Yes, that everything needs to look perfect. Yeah, that's a better way to say it. If like, even if there are issues going on, like you don't talk about them. Even sometimes within families, like you don't talk about the things that are hard. It's always like we need to make sure that we look like everything is perfect because there's such an ideal that everyone is trying to live up to that very few people actually can, if any.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's also something that's just so classic Mormon. Your dad and your mom were just perceived as like the perfect Mormon family. Your dad's in the bishopric as someone who had been hiding and lying things since before his mission, which calls into question for the 10,000th time the Mormon Church's teachings of discernment.
Yeah.
Because why would God call your dad into a bishopric? You know,
It's a really good question.
when he was actively cheating on your mom and bilking friends and family members out of I'm sure it was millions of dollars.
Yeah, I don't know, but yeah.
Anyway, so Mormon, you know?
You're very, yes.
And hard.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And emotional and
You're
personal.
13.
I was 13. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So, and so he was subsequently excommunicated.
For fraud or for the infidelity or both?
Probably both, I would assume.
Church usually cares more about infidelity than fraud.
Yeah, I would be curious to know if the infidelity part hadn't been part of it, if like he would have been excommunicated. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was all of it. Yeah, for sure. So that was all pretty crazy.
What was your experience processing divorce versus excommunication? Because divorce, like as your 13-year-old self,
Yeah.
divorce is kind of earthly,
Yes.
whereas excommunication for a family kind of nulls and voids.
Yeah.
That's the violence of
Right.
excommunicating one member of a family, right?
Yeah.
Is that it kind of
Especially the man, the father,
Right.
because it's all
gendered.
yes, it's all connected to him. Like a woman
Right.
has to be sealed to a man. So I don't think that I really understood that part of it as much as a 13-year-old. Like I didn't understand the nuances of like how sealings all work. I knew that my parents had been married in the temple, and so that meant that they were sealed, so we would be together forever. But for some reason, like I never questioned that like I would be with my mom in the celestial kingdom. Like, well, we're still sealed to each other, which technically I don't even know if that was true at that point. But in my mind it was. Like that didn't feel like, well, that they're not going to like cancel that part of it because that's my mom and my siblings. Like,
except you can't make it to the celestial kingdom without a worthy spouse. And
right.
so your family wasn't a celestial family anymore.
Yeah. Which again,
Which
like
you
I
didn't know.
I don't know that I really understood that at the time. I definitely was sad about not being with my dad forever. And specifically that like, that like he wouldn't be in the celestial kingdom. Like I literally used to imagine like, well, I guess I'm just going to have to like go visit him in the whichever lower kingdom.
Yeah.
Take the elevators down, down.
Yeah. Yeah. And that for sure was sad. But I think the divorce part of it was a much bigger deal because that was way more, that all of the sealing and everything felt very far away. And the divorce, what was happening to our family then was a much bigger issue.
Tangible.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, for sure. I did think about that every once in a while. Like how is that like going to work? Like go visit him where? Where would he be? Where would I be? What does that mean? But as a 13-year-old, I don't know. I didn't like think about it super deeply, you know?
So when you think about your story and this happening, this thing, you know, so sudden happening, do you look at it like things changed for you, that a part of you emerged or parts of you emerged in that moment had to be different? Or how do you, when you're thinking back, what do you notice after that?
That's a really good question. I don't know that I would say it happened like in that moment, but for sure, as things progressed from that point on, I stepped into the role of like second mom pretty quickly.
So responsibility.
Yes.
You felt a lot of.
Yes, for sure. I mean, I already had been like, I would babysit my siblings, right? Like I was 13 at that point. I'd been babysitting my siblings. My little brother, especially, who, like I said, was 3 at the time, was like genuinely like I was his second mom, especially after all of this happened. You know, I changed diapers. I did all of those things. And all of that just kind of got even amplified after the divorce happened. And not even like second mom, yes, but also like almost like a proxy spouse to my mom. My mom and I were and are still like very, very close. And we're similar in a lot of ways too. So like we just, you know, we just click, we get each other, and we're super close. And as I got older, it really was like, I mean, my mom didn't have anyone. You can imagine like how awful this was for her. Like the things that I felt, the betrayal and hurt and anger and all of that stuff that I felt was like times a million for my poor mom. And she had to, you know, pick up the pieces and figure out like how to be a single mom, and how she had a degree from BYU in dance. She was on the ballroom dance team. So at least she had a degree, but then she had to figure out like what to do, like how to go. Like, so she like taught dance classes at Salt Lake Community College. Wow. And then eventually went to get her master's degree in like exercise science. So she was busy.
Isn't BYU's ballroom dance team like
it's
internationally
amazing. Very competitive.
Competitive and world famous?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And she was like really good too. Had solo parts and stuff. Like, beautiful, super talented dancer.
There's a reason why so you think you can dance contestants are Mormon, because Utah County, Provo, Orem is intense dance territory.
Especially ballroom dance for some reason. So all of that happened. And I should mention too that because this is a big part of it. So my dad was excommunicated, and at the point he was excommunicated, he still had his testimony. He fully planned on getting rebaptized and like doing it all, the whole repentance process, all of it. And then so I don't know who he started talking to. Someone started telling him about Joseph Smith and he started looking into church history, and I think maybe read Rough Stone Rolling, I want to say, or maybe No Man Knows My History. I'm not sure which one. And so then he had a whole faith crisis after all of this happened.
Around what year would this have been, just so I can put it in my timeline? It would have been after 2005 at least.
Yeah, 2009 was when the divorce happened.
Okay. So he's having his faith crisis around 2009.
Yeah,
Okay.
2009. I don't know exactly when, but really soon after the excommunication. So you can imagine he's spiraling in lots of ways. His entire life has fallen apart. He and now his faith he's like totally lost it, and didn't handle any of that super well because he started then, like there's a specific memory I have where he took me out to lunch, and at Subway in Sandy, I like remember exactly where we were, and started my, like, again, like 13, maybe I was 14 by this point, started trying to tell me about Joseph Smith, and that he had been learning these things about Joseph Smith and about, like, I don't even remember exactly what he said anymore, but it was so upsetting. Like,
what was upsetting?
That I felt like, well, I was so confused. I was like, what are you doing? Like, after all of this, you have destroyed our lives at this point, and now you're trying to tell me that, like, you don't believe in the church anymore either? Like, so none of this was real to you? Like, that's how it felt to me. And I was like mad. I didn't take anything that he was saying seriously. To me, it felt like, I was like, oh, you're just taking the easy way. It's so much easier at this point for you to say you don't believe it anymore.
Yeah.
Because because of course, like,
you
the
just
whole
got ousted.
Right.
From it.
And I mean, he was in the bishopric. Like, it was very public. Like, everyone knew what had happened in the whole ward. And, like,
probably in the stake and probably in the city, right?
Yeah.
When people lose millions of dollars, it gets around.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how it felt to me. Was like, my reaction was to be really angry and confused. Like I was like, this is everything you've been teaching me my entire life. You're now trying to tell me that you don't believe it anymore. Like, so confusing and so upsetting. Yeah. And that was another kind of, like, nail in the coffin, I guess, of, like, where I was like, I can't talk to you. Like, I don't know who you are. I don't know what I felt like, this is like, you've been captured by Satan and are now trying to get me to follow you. Like, that's not, like, it was scary and upsetting and very, like, so then.
And I'm guessing when your family is being blown up, the church would be a comfort. It would be a place of security for you.
Yes.
So to have him tampering with maybe your only source of security and comfort.
And your entire worldview as a child. Like, this is everything. This is this is the way that I view the world and everything. And now you're, like, trying to tell me that it's not real anymore. Yeah. So then.
I will say it must have been weird for him to be in trouble with the law for fraud, to find out that the founder of his religion set the example.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I've never asked him about that. That would be interesting to talk to him about. Yeah. So then that changed the nature of the divorce a lot too, because my dad was obviously, like, very sorry for everything he had done, and still was, but there wasn't as much, like, contention. Like, my dad was very willing to just, like the custody situation. My mom had, like, basically full custody, and he didn't really fight on that. We would go to his house, like, every other weekend is pretty much the majority of the time that we spent with him. But then when, like, the whole, like, church, he started, like, he left the church, then he starts, like, drinking and doing other, like, drugs and stuff, like, really was spiraling bad, which makes sense. He was, not in a good place. So then he became like a dangerous person in the eyes of my mom and her entire family and me, really, because suddenly it was like, well, now he's gonna, like, try and pull the kids away from the church, like, and obviously we can't let that happen. That's not going to happen. And so even though before it had obviously been painful and there were obviously feelings of, like, hurt and betrayal and all of that, now it was like, he's going to try and do more damage now. And so my commitment, like, I very much was on my mom's side, and I wasn't really interested in hearing my dad's side of anything. And my mom's family, who again were, like, all very Mormon, also did a really good job of, like, really demonizing my dad and convincing me, for sure, and I think my siblings a little bit less than me, but definitely me, that, like, I mean, they like comparisons to Korihor, who is like the Antichrist in the Book of Mormon. And yeah, that's really what it felt like, was like, now Dad is a dangerous person who is going to do everything he can to pull us away from the church and like really ruin the eternal family.
Okay.
And so it became my job to be the person who would like be my mom's support in this fight now between Satan, genuinely,
Wow.
and my dad. Yeah, that's what it felt like to me.
That's very heavy.
Yeah, it was intense.
So then, yeah, how does your adolescence proceed from there?
Yeah.
He didn't go to prison immediately, I'm thinking it.
No. So, yeah, that didn't come till much later because the legal system
Slow.
is so slow. Yeah. So, my adolescence, in spite of all of that, I was like actually a really happy, self-confident teenager. Again, I like really thrived in the church, and I just continued to sort of distance myself from my dad. I didn't like being around him. Being around him was upsetting and confusing, and again, felt dangerous. So even though I did feel like a responsibility to be sort of an example for my siblings, it got to the point where being at his house like every other weekend was just so awful for me that I was like, I can't do this anymore. And it was also so painful for me to leave my mom. Leaving my mom alone every other weekend was like so heartbreaking for me because obviously, like, this was awful for her. Again, like, everything that she had done everything that she was supposed to do. She had married the returned missionary. She had, served in the church, like, checked all of the boxes, and everything blew up for her. And so, I really felt like, even more so than my responsibility to my siblings, I felt an intense responsibility to, like I said before, like, be a support to my mom and be someone that my mom, she didn't have anyone. And I was like, well, I couldn't just like leave her alone. So my relationship with my dad, I basically just kind of stopped talking to him. I didn't talk to him very much. My siblings would go over every other weekend, and that was always like upsetting or contentious in some way. But aside from that, like in high school and like in the church and stuff, I really thrived. I was really into theater. I loved that. That became like the core like part of my identity, which will come into play later too, is that like I loved it so much, and like I was good.
Like high school or community or both?
Mm-hmm, both.
Any leads you want to share?
Yeah.
Because I'm a theater nerd.
Yeah. So my favorite one that I ever did was I was Ursula, the Sea Witch in The Little Mermaid. Ooh. That was really fun.
Did you do Hale or?
No,
okay.
I was never that professional. No, that was just like Sandy Arts
okay.
theater.
You were Ursula?
Yeah.
Okay.
And like, it was like Little Mermaid
Poor
Junior.
unfortunate soul.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Go ahead. Make your choice.
Yes. It was so fun. Playing the villain was really fun for me for some reason. It's just, I don't know, more fun than playing like the sweet princess. But anyway, so because it was so different from like how I actually was. It was really fun. In my senior year of high school, in like my high school theater, I was Hoddle and Fiddler on the Roof. That was a fun one too.
Oh, yeah.
Hoddle.
Yep. Those are
if
like,
I were a rich man.
Yep. Mm-hmm. In middle school, I did The Music Man. I was Marion the librarian in The Music Man. Yeah. So yeah, lots of like, so fun.
I bet Matchmaker is a phenomenal song to sing.
So fun.
That would be an amazing song.
Yeah,
to sing.
that was so fun. Yeah, with the three of us. Yeah, that was.
Wait, which one were you married to? Which one was Hoddle?
Perchik, the one who gets exiled to Siberia.
Okay.
And like leaves halfway through Act 2. So but she was like the only daughter who really had a solo. So I was happy with that.
What was that? What was that solo?
Far From the Home I Love.
That's right.
Yeah. It's really beautiful.
Far from the home I love.
Yes.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I'm showing off. I can't help it.
I love it. So that was like, it was such an amazing like outlet for me. I loved to sing. And like I said before, like I've always loved stories, and storytelling was so fun. Storytelling with music was like, it was just, the best thing ever. I loved it so much. And choir too. I was really involved in the choir program in my high school. So that was like took up the majority of my time. I was like almost always in a production of some kind. And then I really loved church as well. I really loved young women's. I had like really awesome young women's leaders. I was like really lucky. Had always had just, awesome leaders and good experiences. I was always typically like in leadership too in young women's. Like I was almost always in whatever presidency, Beehive presidency, Maya Maid presidency. So it was just like I said, like for some reason it just like worked for me. Like I just fit into that mold really well. So I was, and I have the type of personality where like, I don't mind speaking or having attention on me or like that I didn't like need to be the center of attention, but I was comfortable being in like a leadership role or singing in church. I always loved doing that and stuff. So despite everything at home, like home situation and all of that being like kind of tumultuous, my life in high school and church and stuff, I was like on seminary council too in high school. So very involved in like church and all of that stuff. I was busy and I really was. I was happy as a teenager and very confident.
Any worthiness, I'll say in quotes, any worthiness encounters with your bishop?
No, I wasn't a super like boy crazy teenager. I thought that the girls that were really crazy about boys were silly. So I didn't kiss very many boys. I did have a boyfriend my senior year of high school that like we got pretty serious. And I enjoyed kissing him a lot. But I was very, again, like confident in the boundaries that I had for myself. I knew what the rules were and I was not going to break those rules. And so we would kiss, we would make out, but it never got to the point where I ever felt like I had to confess anything.
Nice. I'm glad you escaped that.
Yeah.
I have a question. I was thinking about, what you were saying about theater and story and what it offered you kind of as a teen. And really just thinking about how did it offer you, do you feel like kind of a respite?
Yes.
Or a distraction where you got to live someone else's story?
1000%. Yes. Becoming someone else, like becoming a different person in that whatever character I was playing. And it was like very, an escape for me for sure. Yes. But also I think theater is really cool in the way that like it allows the escape portion of it, while also I think allowing you to kind of process things at the same time, because for some reason like you would find something in a character that I would like relate to, and playing that character was an escape and also a way for me to kind of work through
I see that.
those feelings, because it's like you can approach it from a distance now.
Safer.
Yes.
Like a little less maybe intense or
it really was that for me, for sure.
Yeah. Because I was going to ask you what you feel like, and this is clearly looking back, so we're outside the timeline, but just for a minute, like how do you feel like you coped with the grief of all of a sudden not really having a dad in your life? Was it through kind of getting involved and controlling what you could control? Like, how would you talk about, and did you still feel it? Was it compartmentalized? Do you remember not really feeling it?
That's a really good question. I think compartmentalization was for sure a part of it. And I think just like staying busy, like staying busy doing all of those things, like just, I think kept me on. Honestly, it probably kept me from thinking about it too much. Like, I don't know that I did a really good job of processing the grief of that, of like feeling like I didn't have a dad. And part of me also too, like, it was such a weird situation where like what I want to say is that like my teenage self would probably say like, well, it's not even I don't care. Like, my dad disappointed me so deeply that like I miss the dad that I thought I knew, that I thought I had, but like I didn't have really a desire to have a relationship with. And so it really was more so like my dad died and there's this person here now that is my dad, I guess. But like, I don't, that didn't feel like a relationship that I really felt like I was missing, truly. And part of it could be that like we moved out of our house and into my grandparents' house. We moved in with my mom's parents. And so my grandpa was there. So we did have that, more father figure, priesthood leader person in the home. So I think that helped with that as well. But yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I will have to think about that more. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like through high school you're living the Mormon dream, except for your family blowing up.
Except
but the church was an amazing support and structure for you.
Yes.
And almost like same with me, like student body president and captain of the varsity basketball team, just because like I'm not going to end up like, the people who blew up in my world.
Yes.
So I was going to be Nephi. It sounds like you were the female equivalent of Nephi.
Very much.
In part reacting to the destruction you saw when you stray from the church's path.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Okay. Yeah. It became this very clear, like, this is what happens when you
stray from the path.
Yes. Like your whole life gets destroyed. Clearly. Like, look what happened.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Follow the prophet,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
Keep the commandments.
Yes.
Yeah. I get it.
Yeah. Which is funny because at the same time, like my mom had done all of the things, like, but that didn't save her from her whole life blowing up. So like,
oh, that's so hard.
But that didn't compute.
It didn't
in my
register
brain.
at that time.
Yes.
That is later.
Yes, that comes later.
Right.
Yeah. At the time, it was more so like, don't do what my dad did because this is what happens. And
Okay.
Yeah.
It would be like, don't choose someone like my dad.
Yes.
Like it would put it probably back in the court of like,
100%.
There have to be signs.
Yes.
If you're in tune,
you would think
you would
so.
know.
Yeah.
So just don't.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, my mom would say,
oh, 100%. No, that was more the conditioned.
But that's exactly what I thought. Yes. Was like, well, I just have to make sure that I don't choose someone who's going to do something like that to me. I do all the right things and make sure that I choose someone who would never do that. And I'll be able to tell.
Of course.
And you'll be able to tell, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what'd you do once you were graduating?
Yeah. So I got accepted.
I'm trying to think, would you be 19 before or after the time Monson lowered the missionary age for young women?
After. So I graduated high school in 2014, and I think that change happened in like 2012.
Okay.
I want to say.
So that was the wave of young Mormon women all going on missions.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Okay. So I kind of ended up being at like the tail end of that big wave of missionaries who, after the age change. So, I did a year at BYU.
Provo.
Yes. Provo. Yep.
And that's hard. That's hard to get into.
Yeah.
It's a good school.
Yeah. It was like I don't think I even applied to anywhere else. I was like, I'm going to BYU. Like,
Did you apply to the theater program? Did you apply for scholarships?
Yes. So the way that the theater program, the music dance theater program at BYU works, that was my plan, is that you don't audition for the program until like halfway through your freshman year. So you do like, it's silly, but like you do pre-music dance theater classes. So I was like taking acting classes and stuff like that at BYU. And I also had this was part of the teenage stuff too. I went to EFY a couple of times, but I also they do like a young ambassadors camp at BYU, which for those who don't know, Young Ambassadors is like we were talking about the ballroom dance team at BYU. Young Ambassadors is the musical theater version of that. And they sing and dance and act. They put on these little like review shows where they do a bunch of different songs and they travel around the world the same way that the ballroom dance team does. It's like a missionary effort that the church uses the Young Ambassador program.
But it's like super elite performers, kind of like Donnie Marie Osmond, David Archuleta level performers.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And I had some family members who had been in Young Ambassadors before as well. And that was like the dream. Like music, dance theater, and Young Ambassadors at BYU was like all I wanted. And I had been to one of those camps, like probably my junior or senior year, like in between, I think, the summer in between, and loved it. Just loved it so much. Like had so much fun. The counselor that I had was like amazing. I got like a solo in one of the numbers, which was a big deal because there were lots of kids.
Do you remember?
I think it was Can't Help Falling in Love by Elvis Presley. Because they do like a whole review of like a bunch of different styles of songs. It's not all like musical theater Broadway. So yeah, that was my goal going to BYU. And I was really excited to go to BYU because BYU had been like hyped up a lot, especially by my mom. Both of my parents went there. My mom, again, was on the ballroom dance team and just like loved her experience at BYU so much, like loved it there. Yeah, just so much. And so there was like, I had really high expectations.
Margie and I were probably at BYU the same time as your parents, I'm guessing.
Probably. Yeah. In like, 90s.
Yeah. Early 90s. Yeah.
Early 90s. Yeah. I was born in 96. So yeah. Yeah. Around the same time.
That's where Margie and I met.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I had really high expectations for BYU and had good experiences with the Young Ambassador stuff and like all of that. So moving to college was hard on me. I struggled just
now,
socially.
Sandy to Provo is like, what, 20 minutes?
Like 40.
40 minutes, okay.
Yeah, just down the road.
It's at least one county south, right?
At that point, though,
it felt far.
I know,
because
I'm
you were
kidding.
talking
No,
about
but
your role in the family.
Yes.
And also how you felt responsible for
Leaving
your
your mom
mom.
behind.
Leaving my mom was
the
hard.
nature of your relationship was
Made it harder.
a bit
Yes.
more dependent because of circumstances.
100%.
Is that part of it?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was hard. I knew it would be hard on my mom too, for me to leave
You're
because
like, her friend, right? You're like
we were
bestie.
best friends. Yeah, for sure. And she had like dated some too here and there, but not like a ton. Also, my dad had remarried by this point too. So that's something also to throw in. My dad remarried and had 3 stepchildren. So I had 3 step siblings at this point and a stepmom, but again, like just didn't see them super
That's
often.
right. You weren't super.
I wasn't super involved. My siblings were. My 3 biological siblings were very involved, going over every other weekend and developing relationships more so than I was with my stepmom and our step siblings. And I just like had no interest really in any of that. It was too hard and weird for me. So that's also something just to note.
Yeah.
So moving out was hard and I struggled socially. Like I didn't have any super close friends go to BYU with me. Like all my friends that I had in high school went to other schools. And so I didn't have a ton of friends. My boyfriend that I had been dating left on a mission as well. So that was also hard because we were really close. He was like my best friend at the time. And so that was hard as well, losing him. And yeah, I struggled. And I was roommates with one girl that I did know that I had been friends with since like kindergarten. So that was great. And 2 other girls that we didn't know that I liked, but all of us were like quite introverted, honestly. And so we just like didn't go out much. We didn't do very many things. And I don't know, I just had a really hard time. Like I wasn't in a show because I wasn't in the program. Like all of these things that I had my community, my family, the theater and stuff, like it was kind of all gone. Everything changed. And I struggled. Like I ended up spending a lot of time just sort of sitting in my bed, like watching Friends on my laptop. And like, I don't know. It was really strange for me because I'd never felt like super shy or whatever, but for some reason I really struggled to like put myself out there to make friends. And like, I really feel like that was kind of where the beginning of like, not consciously, but like clearly, like I didn't know myself very well and wasn't as confident in myself and my identity as like maybe I had thought when I didn't have all of these like things that I was very used to or comfortable with, you know?
That's right. And the fact that it's happening while you're following the formula.
Right.
Like you were following the formula before and you found things and you were able to do all the things to keep you busy.
Right.
And now this next step, you're actually doing the next step that's but now your experience is not aligning.
Yes, 100%.
So that's always interesting when that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt like I was sort of just like biding my time, like waiting around until I could audition for this music dance theater program and like yeah, just like taking classes and enjoying some of them, but not. And like I said, I also had these like just huge expectations in my head that I would go to BYU and everything would be perfect and magical. And I would have all of these friends and just be like loving life. And that just like wasn't the case at all. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know, I don't want to project this into your story, but I can imagine BYU is such a meat market for getting married. And after your family blows up and your dad shows that he kind of breaks your confidence and if you could trust people, I don't know. I wouldn't have felt super excited to jump into dating/marriage, which people get married at BYU at age 17 or 18.
Yeah, no, I was not interested in that. And I also had that boyfriend too that had left on a mission. And I was like still very in love with him, honestly. And like very, like I was waiting for him essentially. Like I fully had like the little, have you seen those little like printout calendars that like, it's like a little bubble for every single day of the mission and you like fill it. I was checking off the days of his mission.
Wow.
Which was, it was intense. So that was another thing too. Like I had no interest in dating because I was like, well, I'm pretty sure I'm going to marry this boy.
Yeah. So like in many ways, you're in a waiting place.
Yes. Yeah.
And those are not very fun
and
times.
that becomes a theme that comes back later. Yeah.
Okay.
The waiting place for sure. It's so hard. So, and then the time comes finally for me to actually audition for the musical theater program. And I obviously had been working really hard. It's like a whole thing. You have to like send in videos of yourself singing a couple songs, doing monologues, dances and stuff. I was really nervous. I felt confident in my like the singing and the acting, but I'm not really much of a dancer. That was always my like big thing with, I touched the mic, sorry. With the whole musical theater of it all is that I'm not really a dancer. I'm not like terrible, but certainly, just not a dancer. So the audition comes around. I got accepted for the actual audition, and that's kind of exactly how it went. Like my singing and my acting, I felt like were pretty solid, but I knew that I was at the bottom. Like when it came to the dancing portion, it was like this thing that they taught us that you had to learn so fast. And like, I knew that I didn't do well, but I was kind of hoping that like my singing and my acting would
carry you.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you remember what you sang at the auditions?
Don't Rain on My Parade from Funny Girl, which was probably a bold choice. Barbra Streisand.
Is that Barbra Streisand? Yeah.
Yeah. That was my mom's favorite musical though, which, that's
an iconic song.
It's so good. Yeah. Yeah. I love that song. It's so great. So was maybe a little ambitious. And then I think I actually did, because they want you to do like two different styles. So that was more the like belty style. And then for the more classical style, I did the song from Fiddler on the Roof that I had just performed in my senior musical. So yeah. But then the other thing, so then my whole experience, the audition was just not a good experience in general because the vibe was just so weird. Like it's hard for me to describe how like it felt like, well, number one, I was pretty self-conscious about the fact that I was pretty much the biggest girl there. Everyone was very tiny. I was a little heavier than I am now, but I was very aware of that.
So are you saying kind of maybe there was a look?
Yes.
Okay.
I got that vibe.
Describe it.
Small, like thin, but also short. I'm not super short either. I'm like 5'6". So small, like just petite, blonde, lots of blondes. So I sort of felt like I was out of place in that way, like physically, and that didn't feel very good. And then it just sort of became apparent to me through the whole course of the audition that they were very clearly to me, even I could already tell in the audition that they were favoring people who they already knew.
Oh, so people may have had connections?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was also upsetting because I felt like I had the talent that would be necessary to be there. And also I was like, this is BYU. Like this is the Lord's university. I didn't expect there to be like politics involved in this decision, which was very naive of me, right? But that's what it was.
No,
It's
I
like,
get
this is
that.
BYU. Like, this is
it's like Oz. It's like,
yes.
it's like,
To bring
it's
it back
like
to
Alphaba
Wicked.
going,
to bring it back.
Alphaba going to the wizard.
100%. Yeah.
Certainly there's not politics in
No,
Oz.
This is the Lord's University. Everybody here is like beautiful and perfect and nice, and
He'll
nobody would
accept me
ever
if
do
I'm
anything
green,
mean
right?
or wrong or
When
These are all
I
good
meet
Mormon
the
people.
wizard, my
Yeah.
whole life will change.
Yes, exactly. Are you trying to get me to sing with you?
Yes. Why aren't you singing? You're the singer.
I know. I hardly ever sing in public anymore. So that was like really disappointing. Like even more so than feeling like maybe I hadn't done my best in parts of the audition. The whole vibe of everything was it was like the bubble burst, truly.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I don't know if this is actually what I thought it was. And like, if that's how it's going to be, like the politics of it all and me constantly feeling, it was almost like I could see the like body image issues that I would continue to have in this space, and the way that I truly, like, it was like I could tell that this actually I don't think would be a good thing for me, which was pretty shocking. Like I just didn't expect that at all. And so then it was like I came to this conclusion even before they like posted who had made it into the major. Like even I was to the point where even if they accepted me into this, I don't know that I actually want to do this, because
The experience of auditioning itself had turned you off to what they valued or what you...
Yep. Yeah. It just didn't feel like we were actually here to accept the people who were the most talented or the most dedicated to, or had the most passion for what this is. It was like, who do you know? How close are you to the people that are in charge?
And who fit the blonde small type.
That too.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So I was praying a lot at this point to now know like what I was supposed to do. I had never wanted to go on a mission. Like even when they changed the age, I was like, cool, I'm not doing that. Like that was not something that appealed to me at all. I had no desire to do that whatsoever. But then when I had this like experience with the audition, I was still, before I had totally decided like this is not something I wanted. I remember specifically saying a prayer to Heavenly Father and being like, okay, so I really was like, it was almost like I was bargaining, which is funny, but I was like, if I make it into this program, like I'm going to take this as a sign from God, from you, that this is what I should do. And if I don't, then we can talk about me going on a mission. That was kind of the way that I was thinking about it, because I didn't know like what I was going to do with myself if I hadn't made that major, because that was my plan. My plan was to do musical theater at BYU. So I didn't make it. And the way I used to describe it was that like I didn't make the major, and I was like, okay, then I think that means that God wants me to go on a mission. And I felt so immediately really peaceful, and like the fear that I had surrounding the idea of going on a mission like kind of went away. And at that point I was like, well, that's God telling me that this is what I'm supposed to do. He took my fear away around this. Now I think it was probably just that like I had made a decision and had a direction to go. And so I was like, I'll just do this. Like it wasn't scary anymore, because what else am I going to do? I didn't have any other plan. So this was September of 2015. And I had turned 19 the previous January. So I was actually closer to being 20. And well, I guess it was a little bit before that, because I left in September. So I didn't go back. I finished my freshman year, submitted my mission papers, and it was really fast. I got my mission call to Salem, Oregon, which I was actually happy about. I didn't want to go foreign, which is like, I think unique. Most people I think want to go to a different country and learn a language, and that sounded really intense to me. I was like, I would be totally happy staying here and speaking English. Like I didn't need to do that. So I got called to Salem, Oregon, and the time between me getting my call and going to the MTC was like 5 weeks. It was really fast.
Wow, that is super fast.
Really fast.
Yeah.
It was like surprising to everybody. Like they don't usually do it that fast, but it was really fast. So So I left, did that.
And your dad went to prison while you're on your mission. Is that right?
Yes. So that didn't happen so I left in September of 2015 and he went to prison in like January, I think, of 2016. So a few months later. And my relationship with him still at that point was pretty
Not super connected.
fairly non-existent. Yeah. He would like come to my shows and my recitals and like I'd see him here and there. But yeah, I wasn't really, there wasn't much of a relationship there at all. And
It's probably hard to leave your mom, and she was probably super sad.
yes. Yeah. But excited and like proud of me, because that wasn't something that like any of us expected me to do,
Right.
because it wasn't something that I had ever wanted to do. So, and like, that's, I don't know, it's exciting to have a kid go on a mission. Like that's
And missions don't you think missions for women, it's like bonus?
Yes,
It's
100%.
not like the expected kind of thing.
No, yeah.
Well, it's become that in
It
the
has,
past 10
but
years.
more
yeah.
so.
Oh, was it for you? Expected?
Well, I mean, that's
No.
after Monson made the announcement that all were the young women ships
Yes.
or missions, right?
Yeah, I still wouldn't say that it's expected the same way
Yeah.
as for young men, and I didn't feel that way. It very much feels like for young women, it's a choice you get to,
Yes.
and if you
Okay.
do choose to, that's awesome. But then there are other cultural things, like I also have heard of like men saying that they won't marry a girl who's not a return missionary. Like that also is a cultural thing that I've heard. So it's definitely like maybe culturally. Well, I don't know. It feels like it's still much more of a choice for girls than for boys. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, the boys are like mandated essentially.
And honestly, if, we just did a YSA panel and they were talking about if you don't go on a mission, it's like for so many, it's like won't even date you.
Yes.
Won't
Oh
even,
yeah. Especially for boys. For
right?
girls, it's like,
for boys.
yes, for girls, it's like, that's an awesome bonus if you're a return missionary,
Exactly.
like you said. But yeah, for boys, like, yeah, I would not have wanted to date or marry someone who wasn't a return missionary for sure. Yeah.
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 So, you went through the temple, right?
Yeah.
How did that? What do you remember about your temple experience?
That's a good question. It's funny. It's funny to look back on it now and try and like put myself in the place of where I was then. So I was lucky. My bishop at the time was really amazing. We had a really amazing bishop. And before I went through the temple, he actually called me into his office and like kind of explained to me what was going to happen. Not in like super intense detail, but like enough to where I didn't feel like I was going in quite as blind. Like he sort of explained the whole process of like moving through different rooms, and you're going to I had already gone and like bought my temple clothes with my mom. And so I had seen those, and my bishop sort of prepared me, I think, more. I've never heard anyone else say that was their experience.
That's right.
And I feel really lucky that, because I think it was not as shocking to me. And my mom actually too had kind of talked to me beforehand a little bit as well. Like I had sort of been prepared. It definitely was still like nothing can really prepare you. But it wasn't quite as much of a shock, I think, as it is for a lot of people. I did have sort of an idea of like what was about to go down. I for sure felt that it was strange. It's very different from everything else that I had ever experienced in the church. But I was so bought in. Like, so I was like, this is the thing. I also really enjoyed the movies that they used to do, which is maybe an unpopular opinion, but I enjoyed the videos because there were like multiple different kinds of, and with like different actors, playing the roles of Adam and Eve and Satan. And I felt like in my theater nerd head, I enjoyed sort of trying to figure out how their portrayals of the characters and the story, like, find new interpretations and meanings from that. Again, I love stories. So that story was like, I didn't hate it. Like that part of it was, and I also have always really loved Eve too. Maybe that's weird, but like, and this is one thing that I think is cool about Mormonism is that she is not demonized the way that like Christianity demonizes Eve for, eating the fruit. And I kind of loved that in the temple, that like she made this choice. It felt like a very intentional choice on her part. Like she saw that this was what needed to happen. So I actually really did like that aspect of the temple. But then there were other things like the prayer circle weirded me out. That was the thing that was like the weirdest was the prayer circle.
The chanting and
the veiling the faces. And you're like, standing in the circle holding hands and group chanting. That was the part that was the most strange to me. But overall, I it wasn't like some big traumatic thing for me. It was like, okay, this is weird, but this is what you do.
Right.
And I didn't hate it. There were, like I said, there were aspects that I do remember thinking like, now, like I understand now why people call Mormonism a cult.
You had that thought?
I did. Yeah. I still wasn't to the point where like I was willing to say that I think Mormonism is a cult, but this beforehand, it didn't make sense to me, like why people would say that, because like you just go to church on Sundays and like, we like wear modest clothing and we don't drink coffee and that's kind of quirky, but like it's not a cult. But then the temple is like, it's hard not to see that and be like, that's kind of culty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But not enough to keep you from going on your mission.
No, definitely not. Yeah. No, I was excited. To go on a mission. Yeah.
So how would you summarize your mission experience?
I really loved being a missionary.
Yeah.
I really did. I thrived a lot and ended up in leadership on my mission a lot. So which
was something new. They really didn't have sister missionary leadership until post-ordained women.
Yeah, I didn't know that at the time. Even starting in the MTC, I was only in the MTC for like 10 days or something like that. It was really fast. But I was like a sister training leader in the MTC. And then, then I went out to Oregon and I really loved it. I got really lucky with like companions too. Like I really loved all of my companions. I really didn't have a bad companion, which I think is also rare. Mm-hmm. My mission president was also really, really awesome and really became like a father figure to me. He was, I still think he is like so amazing. He and his wife are fantastic. Well, and actually I actually had two mission presidents. He and his wife left exactly halfway through my mission. Mm-hmm. And I was really connected to him and his wife and not as much to the second mission president. I didn't dislike my second mission president and his wife. But the first mission president was like really made a huge impact on me and was like, I don't know. He was just one of those people that it like so charismatic and loved being a mission president and so like just so loving. Like it was like oozing out of him whenever you would talk to him. And his wife too. They're like really, really awesome people. And he made me feel really special. And I think for like most people, he's one of those people that like anyone he talks to, he's going to make you feel like you're like the most amazing, most important person in the world. He's just that kind of a person. But definitely was like, told me things that like I would be Relief Society president someday and like called me to be a sister training leader and a trainer like pretty early in my mission, like almost like I think I only had one transfer after I finished training and then he called me to train. So like I was still fairly new missionary and was training new missionaries and then was a sister training leader for like the majority of my mission after that. So yeah, it was great. I loved it. I hated knocking on doors. I really hated that aspect of it. Yeah. But I loved talking to people, teaching people. I loved being a sister training leader was cool too, because I enjoyed helping and serving the other sister missionaries. Most of them struggled a lot.
With what?
Mental health stuff, mostly. Just lots of depression and anxiety and difficult relationships with companions. And, we would like go on exchanges where you swap companions for a day. And being that kind of like person, I enjoyed like helping the sisters who were struggling because I was like, I love this and you can love this too. And just always tried to like be supportive and helpful and Yeah, I
So this was
love
around
it.
2015.
Yep.
Is that right?
2000 end of 2015 and all of 2016
Okay.
was the majority of my mission.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's 8 years ago, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been
Okay.
a long time now.
So while you're having this experience where
Right.
you're in it, you're thriving,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yes.
You had mentioned that your dad, though,
Yes.
ends up going to prison, and he serves his full time, right?
Almost, yeah. Oh, yes.
almost?
Yeah, his full time. Yeah, he went in and was out before I even came home from my mission, like the whole time that I was gone. Yeah, so I left in September of 2015, and he went to jail in January of 2016, and was there until what would have that been, September? 9 months out of that whole year. And it was kind of, this honestly was like kind of the beginning of us rekindling our relationship, because obviously I was sad that he was in jail, and wanted to be a good influence on him, because that's the whole mindset that you're in as a missionary, is like, how can I influence literally anyone that I have access to
Yes.
for good?
It's like one goal.
Yes.
You have one.
Yes. And that extends to your family at home. And my dad's in jail and has been excommunicated and has no testimony in the church. So I very much was like, I'm going to get him.
Yes.
I'm going to find some way to get him to at least maybe be interested in I'm pretty sure I sent him a Book of Mormon in jail when he was in jail. And
Was he at the point of the mountain in on I-15,
I think
like
so.
Bluffdale area?
Yes, I think
Okay.
so. I don't actually know, because I
You weren't here.
wasn't here.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that was the whole thing too, where I was having my mission experience and he's in jail. And meanwhile, my stepmom is trying to handle this situation. They had also had a baby. So I have a half brother who is much younger than me. He's 11. So now, and at the time was a baby. So she is trying to keep things together with her kids, my step siblings, and my siblings, trying to maintain a relationship with them where my mom is not quite as willing to let them go spend time with her because my dad's not there. So it was that kind of a weird thing. But then also they would go and visit him in prison, which is a whole set of trauma that I didn't experience. So, but what I did do was write him letters. They were some of the only handwritten letters that I wrote on my mission were to my dad. And we would just write. We would talk about things, and it was actually really cool for me. And it was the most I had ever communicated with him, really, since everything had kind of happened. And I was also very much in the missionary mindset of wanting to be really close to Jesus, close to Christ, and learning about the atonement and forgiveness and all of those things. And it kind of became this really beautiful, honestly, experience of writing my dad and seeing the humanity in him again. And with, this influence of forgiveness and the atonement and repentance and all of that, towards maybe the middle-ish portion of my mission, ended up writing him a letter where I told him expressly that I forgave him for everything. And I also apologized in the letter because I realized that I had been kind of unfair. I'd been protecting myself, and I don't necessarily regret the distance that was there. I think it was what I needed in those teenage years, but I was sorry about it. I was sorry that the main reason that we didn't have a relationship was because of me. And it was this really beautiful, just cathartic experience of letting go of so much anger and betrayal and hurt and sadness that I had been holding on to for so long, years and years and years and years at this point. So that was really a beautiful experience. One of the things I'm most grateful to my mission for was because, that was kind of the beginning of rekindling my relationship with my dad.
And was that experience mutual, where he did the same and reflected and was able to?
Yes.
It's so beautiful.
Yes. He had been really the word that I want to use is repentant, like to all of us for a long time. He knew that what he had done was wrong, obviously, and had been very sorry about it for a long time, and had respected my desire to not really want a relationship, even though obviously that was really hard for him. And so he was like elated to get that letter from me. He talks about still how like, and especially when he's like in jail, like this is obviously the darkest point of his life, to like get that letter from me was huge for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, other than your family blowing up, like your Mormon life through age 21 sounds like the perfect Mormon life.
100%. Yeah. Yep. And I
Other than
not
not getting into the...
Other than the BYU thing.
I do feel like that dream, for as much as you'd been working and really...
Yep.
But yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
But other than that, yes. Yeah. And my mission was great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where did things go south? I guess so you come home from your mission?
Yeah, so still not for a while. So I came home from my mission in April of 2017, and 10 days later, I should say, so I had broken up with my boyfriend that I had before my mission and all of that. I broke up with him while I was on my mission, actually.
Okay. While you were on your mission.
Yeah, that was like another sort of moment.
Dear John did. Was he on a mission too?
Yeah, he was. He was like, I left like exactly a year after he did. So he was more towards like the tail end of his mission. And I still had like quite a long ways to go. And just like, I had this desire to like go back to BYU and start over. Like I wanted to do BYU right this time. I was like, it's going to be different. I'm going to be social. I'm going to date. I'm going to, figure out. I also decided that I was going to be a family studies major. That was my plan, because even the theater and all of that had definitely always been a dream, but I always wanted to be a mom. That was like for sure. That was the ultimate dream. And so I was like, family studies, obviously. I also had some interest too in like counseling, like therapy. And so family studies, like marriage and family therapy was appealing to me. And like I said before, like, I mean, I love stories. I love listening to people's stories. I enjoyed helping sister missionaries on the mission, like being almost in a therapist, counselor type of role. Like I liked that. And so I was like, that's what I'll do. And it serves the eventual goal of being a mom. If I'm doing family studies, I'll take child development classes, and it feels like something that potentially I could still do while also being a mom. It felt like it tracked, right? And that also was, my mission cemented in my brain that like motherhood is the ultimate goal, right? Like that's what it is. When you're talk about like the way your life is going to go after your mission president tells you to go home and get married and have kids. And motherhood in the church is the pinnacle. It is the reason that you exist
right.
as a woman.
Yeah.
That's how it felt to me. So that's important context for later. So that was my goal, was like, come back, go to BYU. I want to date. I want to do the BYU thing right. I'm going to do my family studies major. I'm going to be really social, make lots of friends. So I came home again, April of 2017. So I had the whole summer to wait before I started fall semester. 10 days after I came home from my mission, I got a message on Facebook from an elder from my mission. And he sent me a message on Facebook, and
and you knew.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. He just reminded me. He's sitting back there. It was the day after we came home. 10 days after we went on our first date. So I got that wrong. Thank you for the reminder.
And we have to just acknowledge the speedily, like the way he was like on it.
On it. Yes. He knew what he was doing. So literally one day after I came home from my mission, I got a message on Facebook from an elder from my mission who had come home the same day as me. Elder Clark.
Wow.
Did you have thoughts or feelings about him on the mission a little bit?
Yeah. How did you meet each other? How did you know each other on the mission? Do you remember at what point? Was it all the way through?
It was basically my entire mission. He was my very first district leader, which is like, how do you describe a district leader? It's sort of the same thing as like you have a congregation in Mormonism and the bishop is over the congregation. It's like you have missionaries and the district leader is over those missionaries.
Yeah, over like 8 or 10 missionaries.
Yes,
kind
and
of
then
like
there's
the
a
leader
zone
over 8
leader.
or 10
Yeah, and then there's a zone leader and the assistants to the president. And then there's sister training leaders too, but they don't they're girls, so that's different. So yes, so he was my first district leader, and we basically served like in the same zones essentially for like almost my entire mission and came home on the same day. So we were friends for sure. And he played piano and was a really good accompanist.
Ooh.
So we would do musical numbers together because I would often be asked to sing at missionary events and stuff like that. So he would play for me and I would sing, which was fun. And I definitely had a crush on him for sure. If you had asked me, I would have denied it, obviously, because as a missionary, you're not supposed to.
You have no desires for yourself.
No.
Yearnings.
And, right. Mm-mm. Yeah. No. Yep. No. And certainly not romantic desires for other missionaries, or anyone.
Right.
So, but yes, I liked him, and we had developed a friendship on the mission. So he sent me a message, like I said, the day after we got home.
Okay.
And he was living in Mesa, Arizona, and he was like, I have a cousin who lives like right in Sandy, like literally 10 minutes away from my mom's house. And she's getting married like next week. And so I'm coming up for the wedding, and like, I want to take you out. Basically, we should go out. Yeah, right after the mission. And it surprised me. It really did. Because we were friends, but like, and I had a little crush, but it never occurred to me that he might also like me. It just didn't. Like, I don't know. I was like a theater kid, and he had been like starting quarterback in his high school and stuff.
Which high school?
Mountain View High School in Mesa.
Okay.
And so like that felt very like, the football players were never interested in me in high school. And so I don't know. It just didn't occur to me.
Too good to be true.
Yeah. Yes. Like it didn't occur to me that he would be interested in me that way. We were friends, but anyway, so we went out on our first date, like 10 days after we had both been released as missionaries. We kissed on our first date, which was really surprising. And like, we just clicked so fast. We went, just so Mormon. We went to Temple Square for our first date, had our first kiss on Temple Square, right in front of the temple. And I don't know. We clicked so fast. It was like, I was so nervous beforehand because like, this is Elder Clark. Like the idea of even calling him by his first name was strange to me. But it was like, as soon as we got in the car and like drove away, it felt so easy and like just immediately. So yeah. So now I'm trying to think what happens next. Oh, this was another thing that also had happened. My mom got remarried while I was on my mission too.
Wow, a lot of life changed while you were on your mission.
Yes.
Okay.
So that was also crazy. So I came home to a stepdad and 2 new step siblings that I did not know at all. And they had been married for like a year at that point. So now all of my siblings and everything are in this new family where I feel very out of place because if you remember before, I was like my mom's spouse beforehand. Right. And so now it's like, I don't really even know where I fit in now in this new family dynamic, role? What my role is. I don't know. And yeah, it was weird. It was really weird. But so I got a job at This Is the Place, Heritage Park, actually, in Salt Lake. Do you know that one?
It's kind of like a touristy thing to learn about the founding of the state.
Utah, yes. It's like right across the street from the Hogle Zoo in Salt Lake. And yeah, they have like some like real authentic like pioneer cabins there and a bunch of replicas. And yeah, the whole thing looks like kind of an old timey Western 1800s like town that it would have looked like when Utah was settling it, supposedly. And they have a big house. Brigham Young's big pink house is there too. So I worked there and I was on like the performing arts team. So it was actually a really fun job. We would like walk around dressed as pioneers and like sing old folk songs to people. It was like really, really fun. But this was funny too, because obviously the polygamy comes up in that situation because like we also would do like there's a train that goes around the whole park and we did like the train tours. So you're like sitting up there with the mic telling people what you're passing by. And one of like the fun facts that we would give on the train tour was that Brigham Young had like 54 wives. really was like something we just like said to people. And that was weird for me always, but it certainly was one of those things that like you just put it on the shelf and you hear the explanations of like, well, it was necessary for the time. There were a lot more women than there were men back then, and they needed
54 times the women than men.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
Right. Yeah. It makes total sense. They needed men to be sealed to lots of women, and like they needed, I don't know, just all of those like excuses. And so
all stuff we know is not true. It's
not
actually
true.
the opposite of true.
Right.
There were more men than women at the time.
Right. Yeah. So, but it still bothers you. And that's something you hear from every woman who has ever left the church or is in the, like, it bothers all of us.
Yeah.
It's not something that you can just kind of just be okay with. It's something that you just are like, well, I'll just try not to think about that too much because, and I'm certainly not going to share my husband in eternity, like in the celestial kingdom. That was something I was very terrified of, honestly, was that would end up happening in the eternities, that I would end up being a plural wife to my husband. So I worked at This Is the Place, and it was really fun. And I felt very connected too to like my pioneer heritage also doing that. It was like really fun for me. But Joseph Smith's polygamy never came up. I feel like that's something to note.
Yeah, that's
we didn't
interesting.
really talk about Joseph Smith that much, honestly, because it was about Utah. And he's not, he's obviously dead by that point in Mormon history. So, but yeah, I like had kind of an inkling that he had polygamous wives because like the Gospel Topics essays had come out by that point. So I sort of knew that had happened. I didn't know to the extent with Joseph Smith, certainly not, or the ages of the wives or anything like that. But yeah, it was just one of those things that like you just kind of try not to think about too much.
Turn it off, as they say.
Exactly. Yes.
So you got a job, it sounds like, pretty close to when you returned. How was it for you to go from the intensity, the kind of scheduled nature of a mission to kind of home, and it's kind of like, all open because you have a summer before the
whole summer,
right, go to school. How was that for you as someone who loves rules and kind of structure?
Yes. It was the first day coming home. I'm glad you asked me this because this is like one of the weirdest things I've ever experienced. The day after I came home, I like woke up in my new bedroom in an unfamiliar house. It was a new house too that my mom was living in because she had been remarried, and like woke up early, like 6:30, which is when you're supposed to wake up as a missionary. I was the only one awake, and I like went downstairs to do my scripture study because that's again the first thing that you do in the morning. I did that. And then my mom had gotten a new job at the University of Utah. She had her master's degree by this point and was working at the University of Utah hospital in their, like, she worked with the people who were getting like bariatric surgery, weight loss surgery. That's what she was doing. And so she wanted me to come see like where she was working. She wanted me to come to the hospital and come see. And so I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds cool. So we got in the car and she took me with her new husband, my stepdad. And I just remember the only word I can use, I don't even know if this is the right word, is like I disassociated. Like nothing felt real. It was like I was like in a dream is kind of the way that it felt. I was walking around in the hospital with my mom and this man that she was married to that I had just met, and like everything again, that the structure was gone. I didn't like, it was the strangest experience. I've never experienced anything like that before or since. It was like it was so strange. And by the next day I was okay. Like I re-entered my body, I guess, and was fine. But like, yeah, it was weird for sure. But then I got that job, and that provided some structure.
That's right,
for
grounding.
sure. And now I was dating John, who was awesome and like very quickly fell in love. Like we fell in love so fast.
Yeah.
Had like essentially, so we came home in April, and we actually did a period of like long distance for a few weeks because he went to Texas to sell pest control for a few weeks. And that was like really good for us, honestly, because the physical like component of the relationship was gone. So all we could do was talk to each other. And we would literally like FaceTime till like 2, 3 in the morning, just talking about everything. And like I said, I think that was really good because we also had a very strong physical connection. And if we would have just been kissing the whole time.
Yeah.
if we weren't long distance. So that was really great. And he came up and visited a couple times and we spent time together and actually ended up ending his contract with pest control early because he was like, I just need to be in Utah. I need to be there with her. And
another very, very classic, typical Utah Mormon thing is for Mormon male return missionaries to sell pest control.
Yep. Yeah. Summer sales.
Yep. Yeah, summer sales. Yeah.
Yep.
Very iconic.
Yes. Yeah. We fall into so many of the stereotypes. It's really funny. So
let me ask you this: when you started dating John, did you ever have a point where, I don't know, like parts of yourself came forward, like protective parts? Like, did it ever cross your brain about like trusting or if you could know someone, or like, did any of that older story stuff appear?
Like the trauma from my dad, basically. Yeah. Honestly, maybe a little. Like, I definitely, that was something that was kind of always going to be in the back of my head. But the fact that we had known each other as missionaries, I feel like mitigated a lot of that. Like I saw him being a really awesome missionary. He was a district leader. He was a zone leader and really cared about the people like so much. And he would tell me about that too afterwards. And so no, I didn't really like deal with,
any of that
trust issues. No.
Just curious.
And yeah, his like family that he comes from too is also like uber Mormon. Like his dad is like a like scriptorian and has written several books about like Nephi, and he's writing one about Joseph Smith right now. And like his mom had served on the General Relief Society board at one point. Like, yes.
Wait, for the whole LDS church?
Yes. Yeah.
His mom was on the Relief Society board for the church?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So very, very Mormon. And to the point where like, he told me it was okay to share this. Like he knew the phrase like hearken to my counsel, which is what women covenant to do to their husbands in the temple, because that was like something that his dad would say to his mom often at home.
That she needs to hearken to his counsel.
Yes.
Oh.
And the nature of like his family life, his parents, the model of marriage that his parents like were examples of was not something that he wanted at all. And because like there was a lot of like unspoken, like not a lot of like open, honest communication and stuff, like those kinds of things. So he, from the very jump, was like always extremely open and honest and just all of that. So yeah, I didn't.
Yeah. So he had done, it sounds like a lot of processing and reflecting.
Yes.
About his own life.
Yes.
And growing up.
Yes.
And that's kind of what that kind of speaks.
Yep.
To me.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I was just going to ask, how was the experience of getting to know each other outside the mission? Because I think the mission, you almost have like different selves.
100%.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because of the way it is, and there's one goal or one kind of focus. Or how was it to kind of explore and maybe even get back in touch with more of yourself while also in relationship to someone?
Yes. It was so fun. It was so fun. And like, I chuckled when you said that because we were friends, but he also was like quite a serious missionary. He took it very seriously. And on our first date, like we like got frozen yogurt somewhere, and he like, I don't even remember what he said, but he cracked a joke to the cashier, the guy that had given us frozen yogurt. And it surprised me because he had been so, like I said, kind of a serious missionary. And also he had also been particularly serious around me because he liked me and didn't want to come anywhere close to flirting.
Yeah.
And so there was that. So yeah, he like, seeing him like crack jokes was like, it was so surprising. And like, I
You're
loved
like, are
it.
you being funny right now?
I was like, Elder Clark just cracked a joke.
Yeah.
It was so funny to me. And yeah, it was just so fun. I mean, that feeling of like falling in love with someone that you just like click with so quickly. And like, and this is a theme like that comes over and over again. And one of the things that I am so grateful for our relationship for is I feel like he saw me so clearly. Like he just understood me, like saw me so clearly, even better than like I knew or understood myself. And like, I just felt totally free to 100% be myself with him.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
And we were so committed to the same things. And so it just like, it worked like so well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So we came home April of 2017 and we were engaged by August. So before we even went back to BYU.
Oh, yeah.
He proposed like in the middle of August on Temple Square.
Went back to the first date.
So engaged in 4 months.
Yes.
And then married.
December.
Yeah.
Yep. So we did a semester at BYU together while we were engaged and then got married that December. And I will say too that I took a marriage prep class at BYU from, her name's Tammy Hill. She's not teaching there anymore, but she was like an adjunct professor and a practicing marriage and family therapist. Yeah. Do you know Tammy Hill? She's awesome. She's still like an active member of the church, but is more progressive, and her marriage prep class like changed my life, specifically her unit on sexuality, because she was so pro healthy sex and pro women experiencing pleasure in sex. Like she went through a whole unit talking about the female anatomy and how orgasms work and all of that.
Brilliant.
It was like,
Wait, at BYU?
At BYU.
You're learning about orgasm?
Yes. Yeah. She was amazing. She's retired. She doesn't teach there anymore. Which
Maybe that's why.
Maybe. But it makes me so sad because genuinely I attribute a lot of like the health of our early marriage and our early sex life to that class, genuinely. And it was like, I loved it. Like I would just
that you had that.
It was so amazing. Yeah. And like this coming from like, the culture is, I didn't even know what the clitoris was until that class. As a 20-year-old woman, I didn't know what that was.
I've met so many Mormon women that didn't have orgasms into their 30s, 40s, or 50s.
Yeah. So that was like life-changing for me. And I became very, like she framed it too, like within the context of doctrine that very much supported the idea that like God wants women to experience pleasure. And that became like something that I was just so passionate about, because I was like, why do we not talk about this? Like, this is such a huge part of being an adult and being married and being like, it became a huge point of like passion for me, was that like women should not be experiencing shame around their sexuality.
Right.
So that was like one of maybe like, I think the best thing that I did at BYU was take that class. Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Yeah. Your connection, I feel like, with, in this case, pleasure, but also like joy.
Yeah. Yes.
As well.
Yes.
I feel like provides such an interesting foil to the seriousness of Mormonism.
Yes.
I think Mormonism at the root tends to be a very
serious.
Like everything is very grave.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Everything has relevance, impact, right?
Yep.
So
yes. And I'm glad you bring that up, because that was also kind of something that I like. The concept of joy for some reason is something that like really stood out to me always. Like in my patriarchal blessing, it says that word a lot. Like I remember printing out a copy of it and highlighting like every time it mentioned the word joy. And like, I don't know, it feels like such an intrinsic part of myself, like of experiencing joy in like daily things. And I was very like, I want to be happy and joyful and find the good in all things. And like, I was also really obsessed on my mission with Ammon in the Book of Mormon, because he has a whole, he is the most like joyful, happy to be a missionary in the whole Book of Mormon.
He's also the missionary that chops off the arms of like 100 people.
But aside from that, though, yeah, that part of the story I didn't care for quite as much. But he has this. But then right after, isn't it like right after that
Isn't there
happens?
PTSD
But
associated with?
it gives him great back to the joy. It gives him
Chop
great
off
joy.
100 arms such that they're piled into a
Violence
mountain
brings him joy.
and have no PTSD, and you're just super happy about that? I want to know.
Opposition in all things, right? It's the same thing that there's like a chapter in the Book of Mormon where he's just kind of like talking about like joy. I don't even remember at this point, but same thing. I would like go through and I highlighted the entire Book of Mormon every time I mentioned the word joy. I was
Is he
like,
the one that converted the Lamanite king? You know?
yes, that's the
Yeah.
story.
He,
Yep.
like, just like walks into Lamanite territory with
Yeah.
the, quote, savages and
Yes.
just converts the king.
Yes,
You know?
which is like very
Yeah.
Book of Mormon musical too. Actually,
After chopping off the arms of like 100.
And in
Right.
the illustrated
Right.
editions, I don't know if anyone else read the illustrated
No, for sure.
editions.
Yeah, no,
but
I
they've
know.
got like a big sack.
of
Like
arms.
he's
yes.
coming back with
A farewell to arms.
just all the
that's so
children
funny.
reading the illustrated.
That's so funny.
But we
go.
digress.
But yes, aside from the violence aspect of it, I really liked Ammon because he seemed really happy.
Yes.
So yeah,
But those were concepts that you
That really spoke to me,
gravitated,
yeah.
I feel like,
Yes,
toward,
yeah.
which I feel like is so unique and like so telling. Because I do feel like amidst the seriousness, it is the pleasure.
Yes.
And it is the joy
Yes.
that makes us actually want to live.
Yes, that's like the whole point. It
Yeah.
has always seemed like that to me. Yeah.
Okay. So you got married.
Mm-hmm.
And how did things go?
So, okay, now I'm trying to think. So now we did a semester at BYU. We ended up moving to Arizona. Actually, John got an internship. He was in the finance program at BYU and got an internship at like an investment bank, I think. Is that right? I think so. In Arizona, in Mesa. So we lived there for a few months. And during that time also, my brother, my next oldest brother, left on his mission. And like he missed our wedding to go. Oh, and that's actually another
Correct.
thing was that basically none of my immediate family was there when we were sealed. And
Explain to this how in Mormon weddings, parents and siblings can all be excluded
Yeah.
from a family member's wedding.
Wedding.
How does that happen?
well, so I mean, you have to have a temple recommend to go into the temple, which means that you are
Can't be a felon.
right. And you have to be like an active, believing, faithful Mormon who's keeping all of the commandments, all the
No coffee,
requirements.
no
Paying
tea, no
tithing
tobacco, no
and-
alcohol,
Yep.
tithe paying.
Yep. All
that.
the things. Yes. So obviously my dad is not a member. My stepmom's not a member. And all of my siblings were just too young.
Right.
Which means your own dad and stepmom and siblings couldn't attend your
Mm-hmm. My wedding.
Mormon wedding.
Correct.
Everyone just kind of
Yeah.
process that for a second.
Yes. It's something that makes me really sad now.
Yeah.
At the time, unfortunately, I didn't really care, which is
Also troubling.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is crazy to me. I thought about doing like a ring ceremony. Some people will do that like afterwards and to hold kind of something for people who can't go in the temple. But it just felt like one more thing to plan and like.
It's also discouraged. We were taught that
Yeah.
it takes away from the sacredness of the temple.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know that anyone really
Yeah.
said that to me, but yeah, it didn't feel like a priority. Like and I was still sort of like mending my relationship with my dad too at that point. Like we were closer for sure because of the experience writing him and stuff on my mission. But like, I don't know, it wasn't a priority. And I had never expected any of my siblings to be there because I was the oldest.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a surprise to me. But yeah, and also John's oldest sister couldn't be there either. So like large
Numbers.
members of our family were like not there when we got married. Which
Same with me
was-
and Margie. Same thing.
Yeah.
A lot of her family and some of mine weren't able to attend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so then, and my brother that's closest to me in age, it was on his mission. He had left, he went to Brazil. And while we were living in Arizona, he was struggling on his mission. He had been having a really hard time. He was the opposite of me in that like he was super close to my dad. They always were really close, even like before the divorce and stuff. They had just a super close relationship and maintained that through everything. He and my dad were really, really close. So it was just kind of honestly like a disaster of a situation. His mission, he left feeling not super confident in his testimony in the first place, and really struggled in Brazil with companions who, were not American, didn't speak English. His mission president was like really intense and not super kind. Mm-hmm. And then he was also like talking to my dad, and my dad was like not being the most encouraging about him staying there, obviously, but like to my mom and her family, that was extremely threatening, and all of it, like, it was just a really big disaster. And he ended up coming home early. He was out for like around 6 months, I think, something like that. And the way that my extended family reacted to him coming home was like really disappointing. Like they were just so much more concerned about, I don't know, like how it would look, or I had people calling him like lazy. He just didn't work hard enough. And like just no compassion for like what he might've been going through or anything. Mm-hmm. And me having been like, I was still a fairly recently returned missionary, and I knew missionaries who went home early. One of my companions went home early because of like mental health issues. And it wasn't something that I felt should be shamed.
No, between 2018 and 2024, some double-digit large percentage of Mormon missionaries are coming home for depression, for anxiety, for losing their faith. Yeah. Like, it's now super common, but it's hard to get the stigma cleaned up. Yeah.
So, and it just became another sort of like data point too for then like my mom's extended family to be like, see, like your dad's the devil. He got your brother to come home early from his mission and like all of this stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is not the end of the world.
The fact that your brother was close to your dad and he still served a mission is probably a credit to how respectful your dad was to his faith.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. My dad definitely did not really want him to do that.
Yeah. So what's interesting is now you're older.
Yes.
But that similar story that's been told about your dad that you actually did kind of accept
at
that age, right? Yeah. When you were growing up.
Yes.
Now you're older. And how did it land now?
I could just see so much more nuance now. And I will say too that John, my husband, helped me with that a lot. He like came into this situation cold, obviously, and heard a lot of things from like me and my mom's family. And my dad and my stepmom actually talk about this still. Like the first time that John met them, we went to their house and he just like sat down and was like, so tell me your side of the story. Mm-hmm. And they were like, wait, you, what?
I'm not sure we've ever been asked that.
You want to hear our side? Like my dad, you want to hear my side of the story? Like, and I did too, because yeah, like I had said before, like I could see the humanity in him. And I was like, yeah, like nothing seemed, well, I felt like if we really believe in Jesus and in the atonement, shouldn't he be able to change and improve and grow? Like, do we believe this or not? Like, I believe that, I want to believe that he made a lot of mistakes, but that doesn't have to like define who he is as a person, and he can improve from the, like, this is the whole point.
That's what the atonement of Jesus Christ is supposed to be.
That's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Right.
And my mom's family never had that attitude about it. And that really bothered me because again, I was like, this is supposed to be the whole point of this. Right. And it doesn't mean that like, I don't expect them to like be best friends with him, obviously, but like, he's not the devil. Like that's just, it started to seem really silly to me. Like I was like, guys, like how long has it been at this point? Like it had been like, I mean, I was 13, so we're coming up on 10 years since all of this happened, and there's still so much like animosity and bitterness and all, and it's because of all obviously like all the programming, like now he's taking the kids away from the church. Like so so I started to, just be able to see so much more nuance and a lot more, like hypocrisy really in like, so like, what do we actually believe here? And my brother coming home from his mission, like that is not the end of his life. Like I know my brother, I know that he is smart and intelligent and such an amazing person. Like he loves people so much and he was like classic middle child, like peacemaker, just like everyone loves him. So he's the best. Like, so I was like,
did you say he lost his faith on his mission or not?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I don't think I said that, but like pretty much. Yeah. Okay. So he came home and like,
which is a good reason to come home. Yes. You know, you don't want to be forced to teach people to get baptized if you don't believe it.
He was
anymore.
like, I can't tell people that I believe this because I don't believe this. And my dad had told my siblings a lot of more things than he ever did. Well, because I never talked to him, but like he had told them a lot of things like about
which they deserve to know before they go serve a mission.
Right.
You know, the truth about the church's history.
Yeah. They knew a lot more about like Joseph Smith and church history than I did.
Yeah.
I had been a missionary. I had no idea. Yeah. So he came home and like moved in with my dad and was not going to church and all of that stuff. And obviously I was like sad because I still, was a return missionary. I still very much believed in the church. We were going to church every Sunday. We were very Mormon still, but I don't know. I was like, I know my brother, like he's going to figure it out. I just wasn't, I don't know. Like I wasn't worried the same way that everybody else seemed to be thinking that this was like a catastrophe. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was a big deal. We moved back to Utah, kept going to school. I still really struggled in school because I was like, what is the point of me being here and getting a degree when I'm just going to be a stay-at-home mom anyway? So I did the family studies. I was excited about that idea, but then I found out how much like education is involved in actually becoming a licensed therapist. And I was like, well, I don't think that's really going to work. Like I want to start having babies pretty soon here. So like that seemed like a lot of time to dedicate to education for a career that like I wasn't really even going to do anyways. So I was again kind of miserable in college because I again felt like I entered like a waiting period where I was waiting for the point where I felt ready and we felt ready as a couple to have kids. I was just kind of like biding my time. Right. So I like kind of bounced around. I switched majors a couple of times and John was like amazing. He's always been so amazing at just like encouraging me to stretch myself and to like do things. And like, if you want to be a mom, then like, that's great. Do that. Like you can like, but he also encouraged me to like try a business major. And I ended up like getting an A in the accounting class at BYU, which was a huge deal for me because I had not been good at math.
It's one of the top 2 accounting programs in the country for undergrad.
Yeah. So I took an accounting class and got an A in that, which was like a really big confidence booster because I mean, I was like a creative like theater kid. Math was not my thing. So that was like a little thing where I was like, oh, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I was trying to find myself at that point. Like I'm trying to figure out like what I wanted to do with myself. And the only thing that I could come up with was like, I want to be a mom because that is the thing.
It is the thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And I didn't, like a lot of people I think would probably say, well, based on like what happened with your mom and everything, the fact that she ended up being a single mom and needing to like provide for her kids and all of that, like, would you not want to make sure that you had a degree to support that and a career. And I was like, I don't know. I just was like, that's not going to happen to me.
Well, it almost goes back to that other thing that we brought up where it's kind of like, well, that's preventable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What had happened there had to do with who, I'm not saying it's true, but the conditioning is like, well, it's partly who you choose.
Yes. And I felt
like the choices they make.
Yes. And I felt like I chose someone who was not going to do that to me. I knew that he would just provide for us and just be awesome. And so I was like, I don't feel like I need to do it. So I dropped out of school in the winter of 2019. I started that semester and then dropped out.
Which is also very Mormon.
Yeah.
For Mormon women to drop out of school because they're going to be a mommy.
Yeah.
I mean, the conditioning is real.
Yeah.
It just
It was intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really intense. So that was, is that right? 2019, 2018, something like that. We moved from Yeah, 2019, because we moved from Provo to Daybreak area. We got a little condo in Daybreak, and we started trying to get pregnant like pretty soon after that.
Tell us about your patriarchal blessing and what it said about having babies and what that meant to you.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty much the focus.
Tell people what a patriarchal blessing was to you and what it meant to you.
So, I mean, a patriarchal blessing is like, I've heard people call it like almost like fortune telling, like Mormon fortune telling. You go to a older man in the stake who is ordained as patriarch, and he gives you a blessing that is like very special and is supposed to be like direct divine instructions and revelation for your life from God. Like he is specifically ordained to like give you this blessing that is like, very specific to you from God.
What did yours say?
Mine said, it actually did mention that like I would know whether or not to pursue like degrees in in college, which is like really interesting that it said that. It also said that like the Lord trusts you, which was sort of interesting. I always found that very interesting. Like he wants me to make my own decisions, but I still really struggled with that idea, with feeling like I was capable of making my own decisions. But the main part of it was for sure that I would have children and be a mother. And there's one line specifically that like will maybe be cemented in my brain for my entire life that says, you will sacrifice everything necessary for their benefit and progress in mortality. And then it says, do not disappoint them. It's like really intense.
That is intense. Yeah.
And like I said, that line specifically like seared into my brain. And so I felt like I have something really important to do here, like with my kids. I think it also said things about like them going out into the world and preaching the gospel and like doing awesome things in the church. So yeah, that felt like it was the point of like why I'm here. This is the point, is to have kids. So we started trying to get pregnant winter 2019, which obviously was like right before the shutdown happened with COVID. So COVID plays a big role in this as well. But so I had as a brief backstory to fertility stuff, I have always had really like irregular cycles, and they're like my aunts on my dad's side. My dad's sisters have PCOS, which for those who don't know is basically like it's a hormonal imbalance in women that often means that like you have slightly higher testosterone, and so it messes with ovulation. Usually like women with PCOS struggle with ovulation. Sometimes it also like you end up with like insulin sensitivity. So a lot of women with PCOS struggle with weight really bad and like facial hair and other things. It's a hormonal imbalance that is one of the leading causes for female infertility in the world, I think, certainly the country.
And doesn't it stand for?
Polycystic ovarian syndrome. Yes. So, but you don't have to have cysts on your ovaries to get diagnosed with that. But that's also something that can come with it. And I've had some like painful ones. They like burst and stuff. It's really fun.
I've heard it's terrible.
Yeah. Luckily that part of it hasn't ever been super intense for me. So for me, the main symptoms have always just been like super irregular periods, but I wasn't diagnosed with PCOS at this point. I had gone to my OBGYN as like a 15 or 16-year-old, something like that, because my periods were so irregular. My mom took me to the doctor because I had told her, I was like, I'm not having a period every month like everyone says I'm supposed to. And my doctor was like, well, the way that we diagnose PCOS is actually by doing an ultrasound, because there's like a specific way that your ovaries look when you have it. They look at your ovaries. And she was like, it's not really something that you need to worry about now, my 16-year-old self, because like you're not sexually active and you're not trying to get pregnant. So we'll just like worry about this later when you want to have kids someday, is basically what my doctor said, which is like a whole other soapbox that I could get on. The
medical system.
Yes. And the way that it just totally screws women over, basically. That it just blows my mind that like I would go to my doctor as a 16-year-old with irregular periods, like really like irregular to the point where I was going like 6-9 months without having a cycle, like that type of irregular. And my doctor's like, we'll just like worry about it when you're trying to have kids someday.
Right.
It's crazy. So I kind of knew that I was on birth control when we got married. And then I got off birth control and my cycles started doing the same thing that they'd always done. They were like getting longer and longer in between. I was like trying to take ovulation tests and couldn't get a positive ovulation test. And just like, I sort of knew that this would probably be a struggle for me. So we went to the doctor and started trying like medications and like they, you know, there's like ovulation medication they have you take and all of those things. And it was really awful. That whole year, 2020, was like just like the deepest, darkest like time of my whole life, because I was finally ready. We were ready to like do the thing that I had been made to do, is what I felt like. And it wasn't happening. I couldn't make it happen. And it was like, it was all I could think about. I was so obsessive about it, like tracking my cycle. And like I said, taking the ovulation tests and Googling symptoms. Could this potentially be a pregnancy? So like, it was all I could think about. And my mental health was, really bad. I was just, it's.
What were you feeling?
So like desperation is the word that I want to use. Like, I wanted it so badly. And again, like, because for myself, yes, like I knew that I wanted kids, but also because again, like this is what I'm supposed to do. Like, what else am I going to do with myself?
And
if this doesn't happen?
Since, do you remember how early you kind of started hearing about like songs in primary?
Yeah, yes.
Like you're conditioned for just so long.
Yes.
From the time you're young women, it's like all about
being a mom. Yeah. Everything you do in Young Women's, like the things they teach you, like how to cook meals and like sew things and like all these little homemaking things. And like babysitting all the time. And like, I mean, everyone tells you that your whole life, like you're going to be such an awesome mom and like all those stuff. Like this is the thing, this is the whole point. And so like, why would this be happening? I couldn't understand. Like
why, if Heavenly Father, I mean, the Old Testament kind of starts out with Abraham, and his wife not being able to have kids.
True. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And then God makes a miracle, and Abraham and Sarai have a kid at like 100 years old.
Yes.
That's got to make you wonder why Heavenly Father can't do that with you.
Yes, for sure. And I oddly found comfort in that story.
Was it Elizabeth or Sarai?
Both, actually.
Oh.
Well, because John the Baptist his mother was also like barren for like her whole life too, and then had John the Baptist. That's Elizabeth, right? I think so.
I'm rusty.
I don't remember it either.
So, but what I'm hearing
God cures infertility in the Old Testament.
Yes, he does.
I'm hearing like identity crisis.
Major,
like,
yes.
what am I made for?
Yes.
I've been told what I'm made for.
Yes.
And now I'm having this. And then I'm also kind of feeling like, did you feel like you were having a crisis in this idea almost of a past wound from growing up around your mom? If you do all the things, bad things don't happen. Like this transaction experience of like, but you can protect yourself though.
Yeah.
But you can get what you want if you do all the things. See, that's what made that whole thing that happened when I was young make sense.
Right.
But now I'm the one doing all the things.
And it's not working.
Right. And so that's another kind of crisis of like, wait, hold on.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know that I like thought it that like consciously, but yes, it was, it was the first time in my life that I felt angry at God and like hurt. Like what, like this is what you want me to do. This is what I'm supposed to do. Like why?
And you're all powerful.
Yes. So like, why does this keep happening? Why? And it went on for like a long time. That whole year of 2020, we did lots of different like medications and stuff. And it was really hard. And everything was shut down. So we weren't going to church either. So, and we weren't really doing like, we weren't good at like doing sacrament meeting at home. It was just the two of us, and it felt sort of silly to like have him bless the sacrament and do, I don't know. It was weird. It felt weird to do that.
Can I just ask one question? I've always wondered this. So if you're in a marriage, a Mormon marriage, where both are jonesing for kids, that's the whole purpose. Both of you have been raised. And then you're the one whose body isn't able to, so far, to make the baby grow. You've got to feel a lot of things as it relates to your partner and why they married you and what they were hoping for or expecting and whether they'll even still want you. Can you talk about what feelings went through your mind, what fears went through your mind, and what those conversations were like, if you had them?
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good question. I definitely had those kinds of thoughts for sure when it became 100% clear that it was me that was the problem, because we had him tested as well. You feel really, I felt a lot of guilt about it. He knew that like I had struggled with my cycle and stuff beforehand. Like I warned him before we got married that I think it's probably going to be kind of hard for me to have kids. Obviously I didn't know exactly, but like I kind of knew that it probably would be not super easy. So it wasn't something that totally surprised him, which helped, I think. But also John is like just the most amazing. He never, ever made me feel that way, ever. And was always so like, had my best interests in mind always, and was just always so supportive of me and doing whatever we needed to do to like make it happen. Or if we need to take a break, let's take a break. Or like, he was always so respectful of the fact that like, this is, it's us. Like, obviously we're having kids together, but it's my body. I go through a lot more obviously in this process than he does. And was never, ever like, never expressed to me anything of feeling like he had been, I don't know, like gypped of something that he had expected. And our relationship has always been so great. We've always been such like best friends that like, we were really happy, just the two of us together always. And so like, yeah, I feel I'm really lucky that he's really awesome. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's that year of infertility during COVID, and then how did things progress?
So, by that point, he also John was super encouraging of me to like find something. Like, you have to, like, you can't just sit here and like feel sad about this all the time. Like you've got to like do something. So what I latched onto was actually like exercise during that year at home. I had never enjoyed exercise my whole life. Like, all of my siblings were always like really into sports and all of those things. And that was just like not my thing. Not athletic, hated working out, absolutely hated it. But being stuck inside, dealing with this infertility thing, I needed some kind of outlet. And so I started doing like at-home workouts on YouTube and got so into it. Like, it became such an amazing outlet for me, for like seriously therapy, and like to set a goal too. Like, I set a goal of like, this is how much weight I want to lose and really work towards that goal, and feeling like finally I have something that I can work towards and actually achieve. Because that's one of the hardest parts about infertility, is that it's something that you want so desperately, and you have so little control over the outcome. And so that was like this light bulb thing for me, where I was like, oh, I need things to be working on. Like, I can't just sit around waiting for this to happen anymore. Like, so that helped a lot. And I also started then like sharing a little bit on Instagram about like our experience with infertility after about that first year, when I had like kind of lifted out of that deep, dark fog some, because it's so common And like, I knew that. I would hear the statistics about that and felt like I was just suffering alone in this experience. And I needed like other people to talk about this with. Like, how do I, like, I know that there are other people experiencing this. It's not just me. So I opened up about it on social media and got just like so many responses from people. This was like back on Instagram, like before reels were even a thing. It was still just pictures. So I would just do posts and kind of talk about it. And then like as reels started happening, I would post more about that too, and ended up gaining like a little bit of a following on Instagram, talking about infertility and having this community of women that we could all like kind of commiserate about this experience together, which was like so amazing. And also it became like a creative outlet for me as well, that sort of felt like my like theater talents sort of lent themselves to as well. It was like rediscovering this part of myself that I hadn't been able to use in so long, and kind of like repackaging it in a new way that where now I can do that. I can talk to people on social media, and I would do, like the funny little like trending audios and like laugh at the pain of infertility, and people really responded to it, and people really liked it, and I had so much fun doing it. And so it was like I started finally reconnecting to these like pieces of myself and finding new things as well, like in fitness and working out and stuff. And another huge thing about like fitness being so transformational was that like I felt like it was a way for me to appreciate my body when in other ways I was feeling so betrayed.
Such an important point.
So that was really helpful as well. So it was like this slow process of like, not consciously, but it became a process of me figuring out, so like, who am I now?
Right.
There's kind of a silver lining in that.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, in many ways.
Yes.
I mean, first of all, they can be separate, right? Just the grief of infertility being very real.
Yes.
And yeah.
Yeah.
So there's just that. But and also in the context of Mormonism, when you're told what you're made for.
Yeah.
And it is this thing that can be beyond your control.
Yeah.
You don't have control over it.
Yep.
But it's so defining. It's just beautiful to hear how unexpected this thing was in some ways, that it brings you actually face to face with parts to yourself that you might not have known
100%
without it.
Yes. Yeah. And not to jump ahead too far, but that is exactly how I feel now. Like, while obviously I still want to be a mom, and that's something I still, obviously, then there's pain there still. I am actually so incredibly grateful that I didn't get pregnant when I did, or when we first started trying.
How old were you when you were trying?
23, which is like a little bit older
for Mormonism.
So that, I'm so, because I know now, like I just didn't know myself at all. Like, I can't imagine having gone through trying to raise a child when like I didn't even know myself. Like, I know now that I am going to be such a better parent to my kids than I would have been if we'd gotten pregnant like 5 years ago. So yes. And so it's really interesting to like talk about. So like from that point, like 2020 all the way till now, almost 2025, it really has been that long, like a 4-year long process of discovering myself. And like so church shut down, everything shut down. We basically, it's funny that like I said that my testimony pretty much like the end of it was just earlier this summer. We have only been to church like one time since everything shut down in COVID. Like, we didn't go back.
A lot of people left the church, the Mormon church, during COVID.
It's interesting.
So like for a long time, we entered this weird period where like we weren't going to church, and neither of us really had a desire to go to church, but like we were still very Mormon. Like, and if you had asked us, like, yes, like this, we're Mormon and we're doing the Mormon things. Like, we were wearing our garments. We were not drinking coffee, not, like still living so Mormon and still very much believed it. But for some reason, like, I don't know, we just didn't want to go to church. Going to church stopped like being enjoyable at all.
Yeah.
And especially as like a childless woman, there's
now
like
you're outside kind of the box.
Yes. There's like not a place for childless women in the church.
Yes, 100%.
At all. Like yeah.
Can I ask you to describe that? Because for a never Mormon, it's like, what? You're a woman, you go, you take the sacrament, you sing, you hear the talks, you go to the enrichment activities, you bring the casseroles to the board activities, you go to temple night. How is there no place for a childless woman in Mormonism? You do all those things.
Yes, but everything is about families. That's like all you hear about at church is like families, like, and the women who get callings in like Relief Society and stuff are married and have children. Like there is kind of like a hierarchy. Like if you are a childless woman, you will most likely get called into primary. Like the two of us got called into primary together. We taught a couple of primary classes pre-COVID, or like maybe young women's. I really wanted to get called into young women's because I loved young women's, and honestly always hated Relief Society. That was never something that I enjoyed. Even like when I was in young women's, the last year that you're in young women's, every like fourth Sunday they would have us go into Relief Society instead of young women's to like kind of prep us for Relief Society. And every time I was like, oh no, like I thought Relief Society was so boring, and like I just didn't connect with a lot of the women in Relief Society because it's such this, again, from the beginning, like there's this picture perfect like Mormon image, and if you don't fit into that, you just feel it. Like and not from anything that anybody says. And like my mom experienced this too, being a single woman in the church. And like that was hard for her. And I don't know. It's just it's weird. It's just something that you feel. You feel like I'm not quite doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, yeah. It's really weird. And luckily I avoided most of that because of the COVID shutdown, and we just kind of like stopped going to church. But that was one of the reasons why I had no interest in going to church, because like
it's like going to Comic-Con when you're not a superhero fan.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, these people are weird. What am I doing? I don't belong here.
Like none of this. Yes. Yeah. And then at the same time.
But way worse.
Yeah. So then at the same time that like kind of all of this is happening and I'm doing things like I tried a bunch of different things. I actually tried real estate for a little while and like, trying to explore, like find things. It really felt like the way I can describe it is like the closer I got to understanding me, like the closer I got to myself, the further away I felt from the church, like more distance from the church. And what I didn't know this at the time either, but like John was also sort of like thinking about he's like so smart and is always thinking about very much like where I am the person who is just like, tell me the rules, tell me how things work, and like, great, I will follow it. John is going to be like, you tell him to do something, and he's going to be like, why? Like, tell me the reason behind that. I need to know. Like, he is like the exact opposite of me in that way. So he started like thinking about things a lot more. And I can remember specifically one conversation, like, or a couple conversations we had, like we were driving around in Daybreak, actually on a Sunday, I think by this point we had started like going out to eat on Sundays sometimes, which was like a big deal. I know. And we were like driving to like this little bakery, and he was basically talking about how like he wasn't sure that he would feel comfortable baptizing our kids.
Were you guys drinking coffee and stuff?
No.
Okay, that was too far.
No.
So was he confiding? Was this like a confiding moment?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was just talking about like he had started thinking about concepts of like the priesthood, and like was like, I don't know that like I would feel comfortable like baptizing our kids. And I was like, what do you mean? Like,
that could be a deal breaker.
Yeah. I mean, yes. I don't think I ever would have thought of it that way. Like, because we were just so
compatible.
Great. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But that was very shocking and a little bit scary for sure. And he was like, well, think about like the priesthood. Like, what does that even mean? And I was like, well, it's like the authority of God.
You're like, oh, here,
like,
this is
here's the
script.
answer.
I actually can answer that.
It's the power of God, God's power and authority on earth. And he was like, right, what is that though?
You woman-splained him, basically.
And I was like, suddenly it was like this light bulb where I was like, yeah, there's like, what is that actually? Like, if you can't answer like the question without using like the Mormon language
That the church gave you. Yeah.
like it, so like, is that a thing? Like what? And so then I was like, that's like, I guess that's kind of a good point. And then he would talk about how like, it feels like crazy, a little bit crazy to me to like, think that like somehow I have some of God's power. Like what? Like God is this like, I mean, he, in Mormon like lore, I guess, like God used to be a man, right? But he's not anymore. And we are made in his image, but like time exists very differently from God, from what we heard. Like he's not the same as us, right? And understands and knows so much more than us, Mormon Heavenly Father, right? And so like for John, like he would say, like for me to somehow think that I like had some power and authority that like was God's power, like that feels like almost arrogant is how he described it. And I was like, he's making a lot of good points. Like,
so you were feeling quite open.
Yeah.
And you were able to connect with his thoughts and feelings.
Well, because I trusted him so much and thought I know how smart he is. And like, again, like it definitely was initially like a little bit scary and shocking. Right. Like, what are you talking about? But at the same time, like I said, like he's kind of making some good points. And like, it also kind of tracks with like what we believe in God and like all those different types of things. And so when he started like talking about those sort of situations, it then opened my brain up to then be like, well, so what about other things? And like, oddly, for some reason, the first concept that I felt like I really deconstructed for myself was like the idea of Satan, because I started really hating that.
That's common, actually.
Like I started really hating the idea that there's this like evil guy
that God allows to run around.
Yeah, that's like trying to get me all the time.
And it did kind of show up personally in your story.
Yes, that's true.
Right?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, wow, I hadn't even made that connection before. But yes, yeah, because it
What do you mean, Margie?
Like with my dad, that like my dad had been gotten by Satan somehow. And that was part of it too, that like I was also rekindling my relationship with my dad. And I'm like, he actually isn't the Antichrist, I don't think.
Yeah. You had already started kind of.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Just, and like observing so much like nuance. Yeah. Like I said, I really just like didn't like the idea of like, yeah, this like guy running around trying to like get me somehow. And it felt like a story you would tell to children.
And it's God's son.
Yeah.
And God's all powerful.
Yes.
And yet he lets his fallen son run around and take his own children, God's own children, away from God's eternal presence.
Yes.
It makes no sense.
Weird. Yeah. Very weird.
Yeah.
So, and then I would like observe things too along this same concept of like, so my brother had come home from his mission early and had left the church. My sister, who is like just a couple years younger than him, never ended up really being active in the church. Like once she left my mom's house, she just didn't really go to church. She wasn't interested in it, and like was dating her high school boyfriend. They're still together. They're married now, and like they lived together before they got married. Same with my brother, lived with his now wife before they got married. And so I was like observing my siblings, who I know and love so much, living not the way that Mormons are supposed to live, and their lives are like going pretty well. Which is kind of like, I thought that like people who aren't Mormon, who aren't living the perfect Mormon life, like aren't happy and their lives fall apart.
Right.
And that wasn't happening to my siblings. They were like actually entering into really beautiful relationships that were going really well. And they were like my brother was doing really well in real estate, like started doing real estate and excelling in his career. And my sister is like so awesome and like killed it in school and has an awesome job. And like, and so that was also like, well, wait a second. And I love
smolder in a pile of evil.
Yeah, right. And I love and respect my siblings. And so I'm not going to be like, well, they must just be like lazy, bad people who want to sin. Like
they're hiding it. They're faking it.
Yes. Like nothing. It didn't.
It's counterfeit joy.
Right,
It's
exactly.
counterfeit health.
Yeah, they're not actually as happy. But that was like so silly to me. Like obviously yeah. So and they eventually both got married. They got married in 2022.
And you could attend.
And I went, and their weddings, they each got married a month apart from each other in 2022, like August and September, I think.
And everyone came.
And everyone came.
It was the year of the wedding.
It was crazy. Actually, it was pretty wild. Luckily, we only were on one bride's side. So that was like,
yeah, right.
slightly less pressure, but, yeah. So, and that was a huge thing too, like going to their weddings and like being there and like everyone's there and they got to make it exactly the way that they wanted. It was personalized. They wrote their own vows. It was like so
I had
beautiful.
no idea how awesome non-Mormon weddings were,
know.
or conversely, how lame Mormon weddings
Yes.
were, until I attended never Mormon weddings.
Yes.
They're so much funner.
They're way more fun. Yeah. And like, I don't even think my sister didn't even have alcohol at her wedding still because like she just doesn't like it. She doesn't want to drink. But that wasn't even like part of it. You know what I mean? Like everyone had so much fun and like I like that. So that was, and I honestly was like a little jealous.
Yeah.
Like-
it allowed you to kind of see that actually it could be a really connecting experience, a really personal experience.
It was
that
so
a wedding
personal.
could like reflect actually the couple involved.
And not to mention that like for the first time in our whole lives, my dad and my mom were in the same room and it was happy. And there were multiple occasions, like we had rehearsal dinners the night before and stuff where like everyone was, that had literally never happened since the divorce, where like everyone was together.
Oh, how did that feel?
It was incredible. Like, so like not all of us genuinely would like talk to each other and be like, this is wild, like in the best way. Like, this is not something we expected. They were like helping, like put these weddings together. My mom and my stepdad and my dad and my stepmom were working together to make these weddings happen. And like, it was amazing. And like my wedding didn't do that. Our wedding, I mean, yes, like everyone was together for the reception and stuff. But there was still so much like contention involved when I got married. And when my siblings got married, it was like not the same vibe. It was so much, not that, I mean, I liked our wedding, but like.
And part of that was likely timing, right?
Yes, that also is
Being
part of it.
earlier.
Yes,
But then also
time played a
part
big
of it
role in that too.
Was
Yes,
likely.
but also nobody's being excluded from this
That's
ceremony.
right. Everyone's welcome.
involved in planning it, in like everyone's welcome here. And it was this amazing, like such a beautiful, like unifying thing to actually see like my entire family together, both sides. Like that just, it doesn't happen. It hadn't ever happened. And like, so that was And by that point, I still very much like, I was still very Mormon at that point, like wearing my garments fully. Like the only thing that we weren't doing was going to church and the temple. Basically, those were the only things that we were not doing. Okay. Everything else was like still.
Yeah, because just because you stop going to church doesn't mean you stop believing or process your beliefs.
No, it was still,
You're just sitting in shame. And,
it's this really weird, like kind of limbo area that we were kind of, both of us were just kind of in for a while.
You've had some waiting places.
Yes.
Or some,
Yes, But this one felt much better because I was exploratory the whole time.
That's right. And you were kind of deciding the pace of that or how it was going to go.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep. 100%. Yes. I was, trying lots of different things. Still, I was getting even more into like health and wellness and figuring out how to eat and do things. And we did fertility treatments too, like on and off during this whole period. Mostly breaks though. Like we haven't done a ton of fertility treatments after that first year because of how awful it was. But I would sort of work with doctors on like just improving my health and my hormones in general, rather than like with the goal of getting pregnant. Like then it became like, I want to be healthy for me.
That's right.
Not just for the sake of getting pregnant. Like hopefully eventually, yes, that's where it leads. But like, I want to be living in a healthy body that is having a regular cycle, which is such a huge, important part of like female health. it became a lot more about that, about being healthy for me rather than like just trying to get pregnant.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which one is a relationship where you're actually connecting with and appreciating your body.
Yes.
And the other one is, again, that transactional.
Yep.
Where it's kind of like, come on, right? A little more like aggressive, like, can you give me the thing? And I'm doing the treatments.
Yes,
and
exactly. And you just end up feeling like frustrated all the time. Yes.
Right.
So
and your body's like it's like this continual, does it feel like it's disappointing you or betraying you?
Yes. Yeah. So hard. So it was, it's truly like the last few years have been like really wonderful, which is strange to say because we have been like essentially trying to get pregnant this whole time, and most people I think would say that, wow, those years must have like been really hard, and I'm like, I mean, yes, but also like it's been amazing because I just keep doing things that bring me closer and closer to connecting to myself and understanding myself and rediscovering that like I actually am like smart and I'm like talented and I can work really hard. Like I really started to believe that I like wasn't very hardworking or ambitious because my only goal was to get pregnant and like I couldn't really work on that. And it's like when I had no other goals or other things that I cared about, I was like, well, I guess I must just like be kind of lazy and like not really, you know, like these are the things that like it does to your brain. Like these were the things I started to like believe about myself, that like I guess I just must not be super hardworking or whatever. And then to be like rediscover those things in myself has been like just like life-changing.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, all of these things are happening with like my family, my siblings. I'm sort of starting to like, and both of us, me and John, both are kind of having conversations about like church concepts that like maybe don't make as much sense. And eventually I started listening to the first like podcast I listened to was so first I started for some reason also being really bothered by the fact that we never talk about Heavenly Mother. Especially on this thing where I'm desperately trying to become a mother. I was like, I want to feel connected to her. That feels like that could be helpful to me spiritually, to like connect.
It's so weird. On the one hand, we brag that we're the only church that really believes in a mother in heaven, and yet she's completely invisible.
Right. Yeah.
Can't talk about her, get in trouble if you talk about her.
Yes. Right.
And they never talk about
it. Yeah. What? Right. And well, now I know it's because I don't think that there is only one. There might be multiple. Yeah. There is no Heavenly Mother. There are Heavenly Mothers, but they don't tell you that. So I started to be kind of bothered by that concept. And there actually was kind of like a lot of chatter online around this time about this concept as well. Like lots of people had kind of been talking about this. And I had mentioned before too, that like I really loved Eve. Like I was trying to find like women in scriptures and spirit that I could connect to. And because obviously like you want that as a woman. And so there was kind of a lot of like chatter online about that and people talking about like, why don't we talk about Heavenly Mother or whatever? And they're in the next like general conference after that had happened. I don't even remember who it was that gave a talk, but they basically like gave a talk that he stood up there. It was one of the apostles, one of the newer ones, and said like, stop talking about this. Like women, like you need to stop talking about Heavenly Mother. Don't pray to her. We don't talk about her. Like it was the exact opposite of what I think kind of a lot of people were hoping to hear. Like I think a lot of people were kind of like, if we sort of talk about this, bring this to their attention, like maybe they'll give us something. Like give us something, please. Yeah. And instead it was like, stop talking about that. Like, you can't pray to her.
Shut that down.
Yeah. So that was really disappointing and was another like a big kind of, and so then I started feeling a lot of kind of like frustration with church stuff and with like specifically around like women, the way that women are treated in the church. And as a woman who couldn't get pregnant, like all of that was obviously like very poignant. And so I started listening to a podcast called At Last She Said It, which is...
explain to our viewers and listeners what that is. It's kind of a successful progressive Mormon podcast,
yes, right? Yeah. It's hosted by two women who are like more middle-aged, I think. Not totally sure.
Brilliant.
But like 30s, 40s. That's not middle-aged, but like not super young. They're like 30s, 40s, I think.
Okay.
And they're active members, but they're very like nuanced, progressive members, and would do, I mean, the podcast is called At Last She Said It, because that's kind of like the vibe is like women saying things that they've wanted to say.
In the Mormon Church.
In the Mormon Church, yes. So it's a faith-based sort of progressive Mormon podcast. And I started listening to that, and they just talked about a lot of the things, like all the things that they talked about, like really resonated with me. And one of them particularly, I remember an episode was, they called it like sad heaven. And it was the first time I'd ever heard anyone refer to it as that, which is basically the idea that like families can be together forever is like the thing of the church, and you're going to be with your family in the celestial kingdom someday, and heaven, the celestial kingdom, is the best. But actually most people in reality are not going to be there with their family. If you have family members who are not active in the church,
or who are gay or trans,
right?
Or,
yeah, not even to mention that kind of a situation that members too will refer to it as sad heaven, because it's a heaven where you can't actually be with the people that you want to be with. It's sad heaven.
And that's pretty much every Mormon.
Yes.
Because like 2/3 of Mormons have left the church.
That's
and that's
right.
your
It's pretty much every Mormon family. It'll be really rare.
Yeah. Yes. What's wild is that like in my mom's extended family, like me and my siblings are like still kind of the only ones that have left. Even to like my great grandpa who's still alive, they have literally like hundreds of posterity, and like it's still kind of only us that have left, which is kind of wild. I'll be interested to see if that changes, but I do think for the most part it is very common to have at least a sibling or a child that doesn't.
And that's enough.
Yes.
For sad heaven.
That's sad heaven, of course.
Yeah.
And I remember listening to that and feeling like that really resonated with me, because none of my siblings are active in the church, and like my dad is not a member, and like I don't know, like sad, like that does sound like sad heaven. And then talking about that whole concept, and they did other episodes of, there was one episode too where they talked about like, I think they must have been talking about the priesthood and women, which was never something that bothered me, like because I bought in. I was like, men hold the priesthood and women get to be moms. That's
right.
That's our special power, you know.
That is the script. That is kind of the conditioned. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just like never bothered me. Like I never felt like, I don't know, I was missing out on something not having the priesthood. The women in the priesthood issue was just never something that bothered me.
Yeah.
But they were talking about how like in like Joseph Smith's time, like women would give healing blessings.
That's right.
And things like that. And I was like, what? Like, what do you mean? That's not, and it sounded so beautiful to me. They told like stories specifically about like women who would give healing blessings, like go to one of the women in the ward who was in childbirth, and like go, and a midwife would be there, and like give healing blessings and be there in a spiritual and emotional, like supportive type of way while they help this woman give birth to her child. I was like, that's the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. Why is this not still a thing?
Yeah.
Like,
and you know the answer?
No.
The Brethren in the early 19th century started worrying that men weren't being as engaged in their church leadership as the Brethren wanted them to. And they said, what can we take away from the women so the men will feel more engaged? That's literally
that's funny, because that's like still something that people say. Like people say like, well, the men need the priesthood because women are naturally service oriented and would just serve and help anyways, but men need the priesthood to make them do that. So I feel like that tracks. That's funny. So stuff like that, like I started hearing stuff like that and kind of realizing that like, wow, the church has changed like a lot. Like that. Yeah. You start looking into what things looked like when Joseph Smith was the prophet, who like is the guy, obviously. It's not the same. It's like not even the same church, hardly. Like, and I didn't even know even close to like what I know now about, but just things like that with like healing blessings or Black people. Like I've heard stories about Joseph Smith ordaining Black people. I don't know if that's true, but like
for sure.
Okay, well, yeah, and then that stopped for a long time, and like that's also weird. And like so, then you just start noticing things. Like things have changed a lot. And if this is God's church, like I know we believe in continuing revelation, but it felt like a lot of like everything had changed, and so like it just doesn't. It doesn't track. If like we're the ones, I taught people on my mission that we have the whole truth. That is what we taught. Like we would describe it to people as like when Jesus died, it was like the church was a mirror and it broke and shattered. And some churches like picked up a couple of pieces and took them. And like everyone had like little pieces of this mirror that broke and shattered, but no one had the whole thing. You couldn't get the full picture because you just had little shards of the truth. And then Joseph Smith came and restored the mirror to its perfect thing. And so then it's like, if that's true, then why has literally everything changed? That doesn't make sense. So this was kind of like the path that I was going down for a long time of like still believing, but the more and more that I hear certain things, the less and less it feels like it's making sense. And like I said before, the less I feel like it makes sense certainly for me. Like I don't feel like this works for me anymore. And maybe I remember being in this place for like a long time. Like maybe Joseph Smith did see what he said he saw, but things got confused along the way. And especially then, so then I heard about the Year of Polygamy podcast, which is so awesome, and learned.
It's basically an episode about each one of Joseph's 34 wives, right?
Yeah. Yep. So listening to that felt like a huge, like, oh, like I'm certainly not going to church. And I think it's so funny the way that it happens, because I think at that point I had kind of already stopped wearing my garments, because I just started, I don't know, I didn't like the temple very much anymore. And like, I was like, did I really even promise to wear these? Like, what are these doing? This is weird. Like they were really uncomfortable, and I was working out a lot more too. Mm-hmm. And so putting the garments on was like just a hassle. And anyway, so I listened to the Year of Polygamy podcast, and that was when I was like, so either Joseph Smith saw what he said he saw and was actually a prophet, and then became like a fallen prophet. That's kind of where I was at. Or none of it's true. Those were like my two options at that point.
Because he's marrying 14-year-olds and mother-daughter pairs and sister pairs and other men's wives.
Yes.
And it was just a freak show.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't, like, this is not like, it became something else. Maybe he was called of God at the beginning, but I was like, he got like it went to his head or something.
No, by Nauvoo, he's indistinguishable from Warren Jeffs or Keith Raniere or pick your cult leader.
Yes.
He's indistinguishable from them.
Yeah. So in my head, I was like, maybe God did call him, and then things went really sideways, and this is not it anymore. Like none of the, like, so at that point, which was like sometime last year, I was like, yeah, I don't think I personally believe this anymore, but I still didn't know a ton about church history, and it was very much that, like, I think something went wrong here at some point. And so I'm not really interested in like doing this anymore, but it still wasn't to the point where I was like, I'm going to like now drink coffee and try alcohol and all of those things. Like none of that was appealing to me at all. I was just like, I'm going to just keep doing what feels good to me. And this doesn't feel good to me anymore. And all of these things that I'm kind of learning and thinking about don't add up for me anymore. So yeah. And then, trying to think, that's kind of like where I existed for a while. And then just this past summer, I guess, yeah, that's kind of where we're at now.
Did Tom Phillips come into play here?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Thank you for the reminder. Yes. That was the other huge thing, is I saw somebody that I followed posted about the Tom Phillips episode of Mormon Stories.
This summer?
No, this was last year.
When I rebroadcasted it?
This was last year. Yeah, not the rebroadcast.
Okay. So the original one.
The original one, okay. Yeah. Someone that I like kind of knew. She had like created like a secret account that was like her deconstructing Mormonism account, and I followed her on there because I was obviously like very waffly with my faith at this point and was very interested in learning about these things. And yeah, I listened to the Tom Phillips episode of Mormon Stories where he talks about the second anointing, which was like, what? Like, it was crazy to me. I was like, there's something else. Like, there's the secrecy. That's what really hit me in all of it, is like, I started realizing how much secrecy was going on. Why are they not telling us about these things? Why is there this secret ceremony that like elite Mormons get to do that basically guarantees them like a one-way ticket to heaven? That
unless they murder someone,
right.
They're guaranteed to be God someday.
Yeah. That didn't.
But they're wealthy and connected.
Yeah.
You know, it's like they give you this indulgence at the end of your life if you've paid enough tithing and served the church long enough and had the right connections.
Yeah. That felt like cheating to me is kind of how it felt. It's like, what? Like,
because farmer or school teacher, grandpa and grandma, they're not getting
no. And the fact that like they don't tell people about it is like this super secret thing. I was like, this is not cool. And so I was feeling pretty done by that point. But for some reason, it's like still this thing where it's like, well, but like maybe, I don't know. Like, I just didn't want to be like too certain about anything. And like, yeah, I'm not wearing my garments and I'm not really like living this anymore. But like, I was very much in a place where, and I still am to a certain extent, where like, I didn't want to say like, I know about anything. Because that also felt very like, didn't make sense to me. Like, there's so many things that people claim to know in the church that don't make any sense. You can't know anything about God. We don't know anything about God. Anyway. So that was kind of where I existed, that sort of space for a while. And I should say too that like John and I were kind of doing this sort of thing together. Like, he was having his own experience. And so we were pretty much on the same page with all of this. Sometimes it would be like one of us would kind of pass the other, but for the most part,
and are you sharing?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I feel really lucky in that too, because I can't imagine like deconstructing this kind of thing like by yourself in a Mormon marriage where your spouse is not on the same page as you would be really, really hard. So, so then this last summer, I got invited to go to New York for like this fertility brand. They do like IVF insurance is what they do. And they're based in the UK. They were launching in the US. It's a really cool company. And they invited me to go to like their launch party event because I was like sort of in the fertility space on social media. And so we went to New York and didn't even like plan this this way, but like, well, so yeah, we were like pretty much out of the church at this point and decided we wanted to go see the Book of Mormon musical because that obviously was like something that I had heard about a lot, but honestly had not looked into because that was anti-Mormon.
It has the F word like 80 times.
Also that, yeah. Yeah. But I had like kind of heard some of the music, and anyway, we decided we wanted to go see it, and it was so fun.
It's so good.
We loved it.
It's not even anti-Mormon.
No.
It's actually pro-Mormon.
It kind of is. Yeah. Like, yeah, it's not like, I mean, all of it's very tongue in cheek, obviously. Like it's
also good-hearted.
Yeah.
And the Mormons come off good in the end.
They really do. Yeah. They're funny. They're naive. They're
courageous.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And particularly the Turn It Off song too, but also the,
I believe.
No, the one that he sings at the beginning.
Pasadiga Evil Eye?
No. But mostly me, that one. Like where he's like, we're gonna change, you and I are gonna change the world, but mostly me.
But mostly me.
That one, yeah.
Yes.
That one.
You and me, but mostly me.
Are gonna change the world forever.
Hey, we got her to sing.
I did it.
Because I can do most anything.
And I can stand next to you and watch. Yeah. Hilarious. Because that was something that John specifically had talked about so much, of like that song resonated with his experience as a missionary so intensely. And he had talked to me about that so much that it wasn't really as much of a thing with the sisters, but like John's big problem with the church from the very early stages that started on his mission was the way that it can feed into male ego specifically. Like that like, what are we actually here for? Are we here for like you to feel special and powerful and cool? Or are we here to like help people and serve people? It like drove him crazy, his whole mission, and coming home too. It was like something he couldn't unsee, you know, in the church. And so that song specifically, when he started singing those words, we like looked at each other and we're like, how do they know this? Like that felt so spot on. And yeah, and the rest of the show, it was like, yeah, just really fun. And so that got me interested in like wanting to actually know the history of like what happened with the church, because there's that whole number 2 about the all-American religion, right? Where they kind of go over like
The
Joseph Smith.
All-American prophet.
Yes. Yeah. So fun. And so I was like, what actually happened here? Like, I actually want to know. And so the next morning after we saw the show, I woke up and John was like sleeping, and I pulled up my phone and read the letter from my wife, actually, not the CES letter.
This is like 4 or 5 months ago?
Yeah, in June of this
Wow.
year. Yeah, because I was still a little scared of the CES letter, to be honest. I had like heard some things about it, and also heard that it was really long, and somehow I had heard that like letter for my wife was a little more approachable. And so I pulled that one up, and just my mind was blown. Like, and it wasn't like a catastrophe, like it wasn't like a super crisis, like awful feeling. It was instead me going like, like it was like just wow, because I had kind of already decided that I don't really believe in this anymore. And so then learning about the history of it was like fascinating, and also like I had kind of a feeling of relief, because it was like it all makes sense. Like there's no weird mental gymnastics you have to do here. Like it just all makes sense. Everything seems very clear. That like specifically like multiple versions of the first vision was like very
That Joseph Smith changed the story every time he told it,
Yeah.
depending on who the audience was and
Yeah.
what he believed at the time.
that alone was like, oh yeah, all of this is fake. Because that is the thing. Like
The founding story.
I memorized that on my mission. That's how you start every single like lesson with a new investigator, is by talking about this story. This is the foundation for everything. And then to hear that like not only were there multiple versions where like the versions like don't line up, but also that for the first several years of the church's existence, he didn't tell anyone about it. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, it was 12 years before he ever told a single person.
Yeah.
2 years into the church's existence, 12 years after it supposedly happened.
Which doesn't make any sense if that's the thing that this is all based on.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. So like that one, I think that's even the first thing that he talks about in that letter. And I was like, well, yeah, all of this is clearly made up. So I read that, and like I told.
Other big ones from the letter that you remember? Or?
I mean, polygamy, specifically like Fanny Alger. Also, what else?
Book of Mormon? Book of Abraham?
That
Not into that?
not as much of a like earth shatterer to me. I don't know.
What about LGBT stuff as a theater kid?
Oh yeah. Yes. That was, that was one of those things that like just kind of also was always strange to me. Like I believed it because that's what, was taught, but
It was wrong to be LGBT.
right. Yes. But yeah, for sure. Like I had a lot of gay friends in theater and stuff growing up, and like I don't know, that was always like a really weird thing of like cognitive dissonance for me, where I was like, I know what is like right, quote unquote, but like I don't know, that seems weird. And it seems weird that like God would care who people loved. That was always like, I don't know, kind of weird to be. But similar to polygamy was one of those things that like I just kind of tried not to think about too much. And so, but yeah, then the further I deconstructed, the more I was like, that is just so ridiculous. Like it doesn't make any sense. That God would care about that, or that would upset him somehow. It's like, so yeah. So yeah, I read that, the letter from my wife, and then kind of told John about some of the things too, and like we kind of laughed about it together, especially after seeing Book of Mormon. Like it all just felt like so just kind of funny and like, wow, like I can't believe like this is what we all believed. That's kind of that's what we believed. That was kind of what we started saying to each other. And on this trip, we were now like drinking coffee and stuff. We started drinking coffee and
so full on sinning by that point. Yeah.
And we actually also had some experience with like weed too, marijuana. We had tried that actually like a year prior because, like my dad and they really love it over there. So we tried that. And that was another thing that was like, a really good experience actually for me. And so, just add it to the list of like things that aren't adding up. So we go to the Book of Mormon musical, and then like the next day of our trip, we saw Wicked, which was like, obviously that was the number one thing I wanted to do because I'd seen it a couple of times on tour, like here in Salt Lake, but never on Broadway. And so seeing it on Broadway was like, that truly was like the more of a spiritual experience than I had like ever.
In the temple?
Oh, by far. I cried the whole time. Like, just that, like I said, that story for some reason has always meant so much to me. I love it so much. And the music and the friendship between those two characters and
Elphaba and Glinda.
Yes, I love them both so much. And like,
did you relate more to Elphaba or Glinda?
I always liked Elphaba more. I mean, she's more of like, her songs are the best. And like, I in that moment, I related to Elphaba for sure. Watching
because you didn't fit in to the church's mold for you.
Yes. Yeah. And like, I don't know. I felt like I had done the same things that she had done. Like I had gone to see the wizard to like try, like make this work, and discovered that he didn't have any power actually. And that the power and that I was searching for my whole life was me. It was inside of me. And that's all I need. And that's what happens in The Wizard of Oz too. And I loved that same thing. Dorothy does the same thing, goes to meet the wizard, and Glinda tells her at the end that the power was inside you all along. I love that that's the message of both of those stories. And then, I mean, yeah. And then the whole concept of then Elphaba gets painted as wicked because she learned the truth. That resonates as well, because I know what Mormons say about people who leave the church.
I heard she has an extra eye that follows your maids away.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, that you must have abandoned this thing because like you want to sin, you're a bad person, you don't care or whatever. And like, yeah, it was wild to like watch the Book of Mormon musical and then go see Wicked and find this whole new meaning in this story that I had loved my entire life. And then like the next day too of the trip, we went to the Metropolitan Museum, and so much of that exhibit is like ancient religious artifacts, right? Like all of it around like death rites and the gods that they worshipped and all of that. And I just kept walking around looking at all of these things, all of these ways that humans for our entire existence have tried to figure out like what's going on, what is God, what is the meaning of all of this. And like Mormons think like we're the ones who have it figured out. Like that was all I could think about walking through there, is like, that is ridiculous. That's so silly. Like, who am I to say that like these ancient, like people in Indonesia or whatever, like they had it wrong. Like, how could I possibly know that? And why would God have waited for like millennia to give the truth to like Joseph Smith in the 1800s in New York? Like so it was like this trifecta of things that we did that weren't even planned, that by the end of that trip, it was like for the past 4 years, the dominoes had like been falling in like the train of dominoes. And that was like, boom, the last one fell. And I was like, yeah, I'm done. Like I'm not, for sure done. And I think all of it was fake. and I'm not ever like going back to that ever again. And it felt so good.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And then like a few days after we got back from that trip, I got my tattoo, my Defy Gravity tattoo.
Yeah.
Maybe like a week or two after that trip. So Yeah. And now I feel like I just feel, obviously, like it's all still a work in progress, but it's so freeing to feel like I can make decisions and that I don't have to constantly be worried about, like, this was something that like paralyzed me for so long, was like the fear that I would like make the wrong choice, that there was a right, there's a path. God wants me to follow a path. And so I need to make sure that I am making choices that keep me on the path of like the life that he has chosen for me.
Yep.
And so it made it like nearly impossible for me to like ever make any decisions, because that was so scary. And I didn't know how to listen to myself. I had no concept either of like how to even decide what I wanted. That was not a thing in my brain ever. Like, it was something that would like come up in like discussions in our marriage too, where like, John would ask me things like that. Like, well, what do you want to do? And I would just be like, what do you mean? Like, that's not even a question that I've ever asked myself. And like,
Yeah.
it feels so good to be in a place where like I can just try things. And there's not like, I'm not afraid of like some catastrophe happening because I picked the wrong choice. I can just change my mind. Right. If I choose something and decide it's not for me, I can just change my mind.
Yeah.
And like that felt impossible while I was still like mentally in that Mormon like headspace. Yeah. I have to give so much credit to John, to my husband, because he helped me with that so much. Like I would not be in this place without him. Like, we helped each other, and he always was just encouraging me to do what I wanted to do. That was like always the number one thing, was he just wanted me to do what I wanted to do, and would push me when I felt overwhelmed by things. He was like, no, you are smart, you are talented, you are like, just, I can't like understate how amazing he has been. I'm very, very lucky. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I just thought of a title for this episode, My Wicked Mormon Journey.
Oh, I love that.
That's a great title.
That's so good.
That's perfect.
Very timely too, with the movie and everything.
Yeah, it's coming out this weekend. Yeah.
I love that.
Oh. Wow.
So yeah.
Such a beautiful journey.
Yeah. Thanks.
That ends. It could have been viewed as so tragic with your parents, with your family of origin, with the infertility stuff, with the loss of faith. But instead, it seems like you've encoded it as like a miracle of healing and growth and identity development.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And as hard as like infertility is, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone, like I said before, I actually am like so grateful for the opportunity that it has given me to actually learn who I am. And like I said, I know that I'm going to be such a better parent now. And also outside of Mormonism, there's so much that now I don't have to worry about my kids worrying. Feeling like I have full control over like what I teach my kids, and not worried about like what are people in primary or young women's or young men's gonna say, or like or having to do bishops interviews like alone with it. There's no way I would ever put my child in a situation like that. And so not only just for like me of like how much more self-confident I feel, but also just I'm really excited to raise my kids outside of Mormonism. It was one of the like kind of last things where we would talk about like, well, what are we going to do about our kids? Like, how are we going to parent our kids? And I finally reached the point where I was like, I'm going to be an awesome mom. Like, I'm not going to be like a lazy mom. Like, I'm not worried. Like, I don't need the church to like make sure that I have really great kids.
Yeah.
I can do that, and we can do that. Like, I know us, and we can do that. Like, they make you think that like your kids are doomed if
without them.
But that's so silly. Like, no, I don't need that.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me as you were deconstructing, and maybe it's because it was over years almost, right? That you kind of had that you were also reconstructing.
Yeah, kind of all at the same time.
Simultaneously,
Yes.
because of it almost seems kind of that it was spread out.
Yes.
So how would you talk about, you've talked about it a little bit, but how would you talk about the way you view your sense of identity now, as opposed to how you used to view your identity?
That's a good question. I feel like, well, now I feel like I have one. And that's the biggest difference. Like I feel like I know things about myself. Like I don't know how else to say it. Like I know that I am smart and capable and that I can do hard things, and that I genuinely, like, I know the things that I like. I know the things that I don't like. I know the things that I struggle with, and I know the things that, like, come a little bit more naturally to me. And of course I had, like, some of this before, and some of this too, I think also just comes with, like, aging. Like, your 20s, I think for a lot of people have this kind of identity development element. Not a lot of people, everyone. But my identity had become so wrapped in the church before that I did anything that was, like, outside of that, I didn't identify with. And now that's just, like, not the case anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've, like, refound old hobbies. Like I read, like, I was, like, a huge reader as a kid, always fantasy books. Like, I was a huge Harry Potter fan as a kid and always loved that. And now I'm reading fantasy books again as an adult, and they're so fun. It, like, brings me so much joy. Back to the whole joy thing. Like, I've found all of these things that feel like such big parts of me that I lost somewhere along the way.
Oh, I love that so much.
That, like, now I have them again, and truly, like, yeah, it's.
Let's go through a few of those. I think that could be fun. So you're saying fantasy, reading fantasy books. Do you have a couple favorites?
Oh, yes. Well, the A Court of Thorns and Roses series is, like, really, that's, like, very trendy. And that was the one that I read, like, a year and a half, 2 years ago, something like that like, reignited that spark in me. That I was like, oh my gosh, like, I love this. I forgot how much I love this. So, and those, the books too, the fantasy book, I also, like, that was another kind of big thing in my deconstruction, was reading fantasy books that also had an element of, like, sexuality. Like, they often depict sexual things, and that was actually really huge for me too, to be able to explore my sexuality in a way that I hadn't ever before. And like, the women in those books are usually quite, like, self-actualized in their sexuality, and the men are very focused on female pleasure, obviously. And, like, that
the writer is a woman.
Yes, almost always. Yeah. Yeah. And so that was, like, really cool too, discovering a world of, like, that where women are painted, like, women's sexuality is something to be celebrated,
right? Which
was something that, again, if you remember from my time at BYU, that really spoke to me. So that has been, really fun as well. And so fantasy books, musical theater, that was something that I felt like I had kind of lost as a missionary, because you can't listen to anything. Right. and I also was like, well, I'm not doing that anymore. And so getting into that has been huge for me as well. And fitness, those I feel like are, like, the big, like, three things that I feel like bring me joy every single day. And then like little things too, like we were talking about my morning routine beforehand.
Do you want to share your morning routine? What brings you joy with your morning routine?
Yes, I really love, like, a nice, like, slow, peaceful morning routine. It makes me feel so good every single day. I, like, make a cup of coffee and have, like, basically the same breakfast every day, and then take my dog for a walk, who is like a little black Maltipoo he's basically like my little Toto, which I did not do on purpose, but looks a lot like the dog in that movie, which is really funny. Just injecting my day with those little moments of, like, joy is, like, it's my favorite thing. It's the best.
What's the role of creativity? You kind of mentioned kind of the reels that you do.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's a creative aspect to that, as well as community building.
Yep.
But is creativity part of a joy that you...
100%. Yeah. And I still do that. I still post on Instagram and TikTok some, and actually now am doing that, like, as my job. Like I do what's called UGC, which basically means I'm like a freelance content creator for brands. So I post on my socials, but I also make basically like at-home advertisements for brands to advertise their products. It's really, really fun. I love it a lot. And so to then now be like being paid for something that is creative in nature is like the coolest thing ever, and like feels so perfect and so right, and also will be sustainable when we eventually have kids, which is great.
That's right. Yeah. Goes along with your values.
What's your Instagram handle for those who want to check it out?
It's Abbie with an IE and the ABBIE and then the letter G Clark, CLARK, Abbie G Clark. On Instagram and TikTok. And I talk about kind of all of those things that I just mentioned. A little bit of wellness, a little bit of infertility stuff, a little bit of like books and fantasy stuff, all the things that like make me happy. Joys. That's what I post about.
All the joys.
Beautiful.
Has there been, do you want to share something that has been, let's just say, particularly challenging in either the deconstruction or rebuilding? Does anything stand out to you?
I mean, it's challenge. Sometimes it feels a little overwhelming with the amount of choice that there is. Like it was definitely much easier to just be like, I know like what I'm supposed to do. I don't actually have to make any decisions. I just follow the thing. So sometimes for sure that is like overwhelming, and that's still something that like I continue to have to work through, and something that like John has to often help me with is not getting immediately so overwhelmed by like the idea of trying something new. That can often still feel scary to me. And I, definitely still struggle with the programming of that I kind of talked about before, of like the self-doubt and the fear of like making the wrong choices. Like I said that I have let that go, and I have for the most part, but it's still there. It still exists for sure. And then I would also say that the other hardest part is like also shedding the expectations of like extended family, and like just learning to not care about what people are going to think. And especially like with my mom, who I'm still super close to, I was kind of like the last one standing as it comes to like church things, and I knew it would be hard for her.
You were the last of your 4 siblings to leave?
Well, my youngest brother is a senior in high school, so he's still at home. We'll see what he does. He doesn't have plans on serving a mission though, or anything like that. So I very much was like kind of, the last one standing, and I knew that was hard to kind of do that to my mom, but we've talked about it a lot, and
well, you did it for you, but
well, yes. Yes,
not to her,
right. But I knew, like obviously that's gonna be hard, but I also did have the advantage of not being the first one, so it like wasn't quite as devastating because like she's been through this before. So yeah, those were some hard things, but it's at the end of the day all just so good, and like just feeling like there's so many possibilities, and like growth and progress is something I'm always going to be working on, and always like there's no perfection or goal that I really am working towards. Like that actually is something I thought of this the other day. One of like my mom's like little sayings that she really loved for a long time, she had it like on the wall in our bathroom, was like, life is all about how you handle plan B. Which makes a lot of sense for what she went through,
and I have that hanging on her wall.
And I love that she loved that quote so much. But for me, I really love the idea that like there is no plan.
Yeah, that's right.
And that feels so much better to me. That like, of course, I have dreams and like goals and things that I would like to see and do and accomplish, but there's no plan. Like it's all just going to happen the way that it's gonna happen, and I don't have to be stressed about sticking to some plan all the time.
That's right.
Yeah.
Love it.
Wow, that's so empowering. I know this is going to help so many people.
Oh, thanks. I hope so.
Yeah. Thank you for being willing to share so many vulnerable things. Thanks to your, I'm guessing your dad's going to be okay that you did this. So thanks to him for letting you tell your story, but also his.
Yeah.
Your husband's here.
Yes.
So thanks to him.
For everything.
Because I'm sure he's got believing family still too.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's not super easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a lot. So this is a real act of courage. You're defying gravity.
Yes.
You are.
What other metaphors? What other wicked metaphors can we
Wicked
invoke
metaphors.
here?
Unlimited. That's
You're
a big
unlimited.
one. And that I've been changed for good.
You've been changed for good.
I have that on a
love that for
bracelet
you.
too. That's one of my favorite songs in the show. I love that. The double meaning behind that phrase. That I've been changed forever and also for good.
Because I knew you.
Yes.
It's the best. Yeah.
All right. Well, Abbie Clark, thanks for sharing your Mormon story.
Thanks so much for having
Your
me.
wicked Mormon story.
Yes. Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you.
Oh, we appreciate you.
And Margie, thanks for being co-host.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Well, cool. Well, we hope you've enjoyed today's episode. We couldn't have done it without our donors. So if you want to support us and help content like this be possible, just go to mormonstories.org and become a donor. And thanks to everyone who makes this possible. And while you're at it, check out Wicked. Think about it as a metaphor for a Mormon faith crisis. Think about the animals in Wicked as the LGBT community or feminists or intellectuals or people of color.
Yes.
Because there's just so many metaphors,
Yeah.
So
many.
all right.
Yes.
Thanks, Abbie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Margie.
Yes.
And thanks to Julia and Maven and Gerardo and Brooklyn and our board and everyone who makes Mormon Stories and the Open Stories Foundation possible, including the donors and the listeners. Please subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Please like this episode. Please share it. And you can always apply to be a guest on Mormon Stories at mormonstories.org. And we'd love to consider your story too as well. So be good to each other, be kind to each other for good. And we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care, everybody.